Hey there, everybody. Let me turn off this for just a bit. Hope you guys are all doing well today on this, at least here, gloomy, rainy Saturday. Hope the weather's better where you are. Though I imagine a lot of you guys are freezing, like Louis there in Montreal. So I'll take 50 and raining over that. But I know someone's just soaking up the sun and making the rest of us kind of irritated in the process. Hope you're all doing well. Got some little channel announcements to get out of the way, and then we'll go to the comments. And I'm sorry if I sound a little bit weird. The weather's going back and forth. 50, 40, 35, 75, then back to 40, and just plays hell with my sinuses. There's another video. I need to clear my throat. There's another video coming out on that thinking of the wrong bad amp. That other video coming out on that Fender Deluxe Reverb 64 Custom. And I found other tragedies in it, and those tragedies are all of Fender's make, not the previous techs. So that's going to hit tomorrow morning at 9. So if you like doom and gloom, check in. You won't want to miss that. And then Monday morning, I've got about a 35-minute real-time repair where I finish up that Mesa Simulclass 295. So I have not done a real-time repair in a while. And while it's only 35 minutes, it's 35 minutes of all the same stuff. You know, I was changing fuse holders and the last of those 400 drop orange drop caps that like to fail. Sorry about sounding like I'm trying to channel Tom Waits or something. At least it's not Harvey Feinstein. Not quite. Maybe it'll pass. I wasn't talking like this about an hour ago, but all of a sudden it's just all there. On the subject of doom and gloom, I've noticed while I constantly get criticized for, quote, shitting on amps and being mean and all that stuff, I did a very, very neutral, positive review of this K-Line Springfield. It's had a decent number of views, 3,000 views. Had some other videos up showing good amps, and they do okay, 2,000 to 5,000 views over the course of a week, whatever. Yesterday, I dropped a video called Thanks, I Hate It, where I just tear apart Fender and another tech. 10K views in 24 hours. So people tell me they want positivity, but they show me what they really want. So should I go more negative to chase the almighty dollar? I think I'll keep doing what I've been doing, but it is interesting to note the wide disparity between what people say and what people actually reward. So and next week I'm going to do a video called Your Amp is Stupid and Your Mama Dresses You Funny. All right, let's get to the questions. Let's see. The first question asked was by Alan Earwood. How does a 12AX7 in the PI, the phase inverter of a twin reverb, affect the sound? Does it lower the headroom? Yeah, you lose a little bit of headroom. You get a little more output level, but it gets a little more grit to it. So if you like the sound, go for it. The phase inverter, aside from the negative feedback stuff, the phase inverter of a twin is just like the phase inverter of a JTM45 or the 58 Bassman. And essentially, the Bassman as published is a little bit different from the Bassman as built. Totally safe to use an AX7 in there, but the classic sound of the twin and the 65 Super Reverb you briefly heard here is the AT. So feel free to play around with it. It won't hurt it. Just don't put an AT or an AU in V1, V2, or V4, or V5. V5 because the trim won't work. The other positions because it just won't sound very good. ATs and AUs are current amplifiers, not voltage amplifiers. But in the phase inverter, you can alternate. Let's see. Paul Bogan, hello from Fullerton. Hey, Paul there in Fullerton. For a 66 vibro champ, is it normal to lose a little gain as soon as you bring up the intensity? As soon as, no. But it is very, it's an output bias tremolo on a cathode biased amp. So if that cathode bias is not set right and you change it, your bias can go out the window. So I would make sure that the amp is biased correctly and that the cap's feeding the intensity pot from the tremolo circuit on the board is not leaking any DC. But you'll have a difference in gain as you really bring up the intensity. But as soon as, no. You will get some artifacts, some glitchy kinds of sounds in most vibro champs as you turn up the intensity on the tremolo. It's just a trade-off. Hey, Jeff Motor, I don't know any techs offhand in the Springfield, Illinois area. Maybe Brad here can look up some stuff on our database of good techs to recommend. I can't really do it while I'm on the stream. I'm sure there is someone, but I don't know. I do know I have clients bringing me amps down from Springfield and from St. Louis and Branson, Missouri, and places like that. But there's got to be someone between me and Chicago. I just don't know who. Hello to everyone. When we first started doing these live streams, it was easy to do the roll calls, but now it would take too long. Hello to everyone. I'm grateful that you're all here. Hey, Captain Fineweather, would I do the tree branching on the tone stack of the AC15C1 if he sent me the board? Well, the tree branching is not the tone stack. Maybe you meant and the tone stack. The tree branching is the filtering change, and the tone stack changes are different. If you're really, really confident that you know how to take that out and put that back in place, I can for you. Send me an email. But in general, I prefer to have the amp so I can make sure that everything's done properly. I don't want, I just don't want an amp out there that's not working right. And then people say, what happened to it? Oh, I did the Lyle Caldwell mod to it. I've had that happen. That's why I no longer give out a lot of circuit stuff on the forums like I used to do, because, with all the best intentions, I say, hey, here's how to fix your X model for $20 in 30 minutes. And people would botch it. And then they say the mod was bullshit. I'm like, well, no, you don't know how to use a doorknob. Sorry. Face blue smiling. I assume that's an emoji that I'm being spared. I don't get emojis in this. I'm okay with that. What gauge wire was used in the 70s Fender Silverface? A 16 gauge in the power section? Oh, no. 16 gauge has never been used in any Fenders. Almost all the wiring is 22 gauge, with the exception of the heater wires, which can be 20 or 18. Typically 18 on the power tubes is what you'd want. Though some of the 70s Fenders used 20 there as well. But almost every wire in a 70s or 60s, for that matter, is 22 gauge, except for the heaters. And really, if you're building one from scratch, you can do 16 gauge for the octals and then 20 gauge for everything else. You can go down to 22 gauge for everything after the phase inverter, really. They just add up the current draw of 12x7s. How many 12x7s do you have? As soon as you get down to the point, you could do, say a twin reverb, you could do 18 gauge for the four 6L6s, then run 20 gauge up through V4 and use 22 gauge for 3 through 1. No need to have massive wire on those Novel sockets. Let's see. I almost lost my place in the chat. Interested in my thoughts on the Tone King stuff. Well, Hill, there are two eras of Tone King. There's the stuff that's being made today that I've got mixed feelings on, depending on the model. I thought the potential for them to sound good is there. I thought the Sky King had some drastic errors, which they are taking steps to fix. The Imperial is a pretty good amp, though I don't think it's amazing, but it's well built. But the previous period before it was sold to Boutique Amp Design or whatever distribution, Boutique Amp Distribution, back when it was all being run by Mark Bartel, those were really fantastic. And Mark is doing independent amps now that are just phenomenal. So the Bartel era Tone King, I hold in very high regard. And the current production, I have a skeptical but respectful eye on. I have not been inside a Headstrong or Milkman, Eric. Thank you very much. I have seen Chris at Rift Amps going into a Headstrong, and like him, I was very disappointed to see bus wire grounds on the backs of the pots. I've got a video up I put up earlier this week or last week on bus wires and fenders and why it's a really common dumb thing to do. So that made me sad about Headstrong. The rest of the amps seem to be built pretty well, but I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but when I see an amp built with bad or iffy grounds, I wonder how much they know about the amp circuit versus connecting the dots and coloring by numbers. I've not seen inside any Milkman amps. I don't know if Milkman, I know that they do a lot of solid state stuff and some hybrid stuff. I don't know if they have any pure tube amps or if they're just all hybrid or solid state. I have not looked inside any of them, so I hope that they're great. And, people really like the Headstrongs, but that doesn't mean that it's as good an amp as it could have been, or, I don't like to speculate about things I have not had on my own bench, but I can tell you that when you do bus wire grounds in a Fender, you're asking for long-term problems. What's the best way to make a Fender impedance switchable? David Treaster asks, assuming I'll be switching output transformer. Well, the easiest way would be to use the existing hole in most Fenders where they've got the ground switch location, and set that so you can go between 8 and 16 or 4 and 8 or whatever. If that's not an option for you, the other option is you could get a specialized output jack that they sell at Amplified Parts, tubesandmore.com, which is the same output jack used on one of the output jacks of the Hot Rod DeVille and Hot Rod Deluxe and Blues DeVille, etc., where if you plug into the main jack by itself, you're using the 8 ohm tap. If you plug into both the output jacks, you're using the 4 ohm tap. That's the other way you could do that. It doesn't have to be 8 and 4. It could be 16 and 8. So that's how you would do that. But so either put a new switch in where the fairly useless ground switch was. You can use the same switch. You could use the same switch that they use for the ground, as long as it's not a center off location. There are two versions of the Fender ground switch. One is this side or this side, but the later one was this side, middle with nothing, and then this side. You don't want to have the middle nothing. So those are the ways to do it. Either use the ground switch location or get the specialized jack. Is it important for a good amp tech to be able to play guitar with all the nuances of the pickups, etc.? I think that it is. Leo Fender did not play. Jim Marshall did not play, but they had people who did play. I'm not quite sure how good a player Howard Dumble was. I've heard that notorious video with well, I'm not going to get into that, but he didn't seem to be burning things up on the fretboard. I play well, but I'm not a great player, and I've got clients, like Logan was here the other day, who is a great player. I used to be a really good player, and between damaging this ring finger, I don't know if you can see that, it's got missing flesh from a wood planer incident, and I've got nerve damage. And so these two fingers don't have much independence. And I believe I have the onset of arthritis, and I've got carpal tunnel issues. I don't play as well as I used to, but it doesn't mean I've forgotten all the things that I knew. And so if I pick up a guitar, it means that I know what all my clients are looking for. And I also know that if a client uses a thin pick, I voice the amp for that. If a client uses a very thick pick, I take all those things into considerations. Hey, working player 53, yo, this is the K line. Yeah, I mean, so these are things I take into account. And, you know, if a guy plays jazz, I want to make sure all that stuff is there. And if someone plays metal, and I'm not going to do it right now with a Strat into a Springfield into a Super Reverb set clean, but I know how to, you know, all that stuff from when I was 17. I remember how to do it, and so I don't do it at the speed that I used to, but I still know the techniques involved. So I know that if I'm doing an amp for a particular player and I've watched him play, all right, that guy's got a real hard right hand, that's got a real soft that guy does a lot of legato, that guy does a lot of tapping or whatever it is, or just real aggressive. I know how to emulate those playing styles so I can see if the amp's going to work. Even if I'm only able to do it 90% of what they do, I know that the amp is ready for that extra 10%. I don't think I could do what I do if I didn't play. I don't see how techs who can't play would do it, because a scope is a very useful tool. But a scope tells you if an amplifier is operating within safe conditions for the design. But within that safe range, this is where it sounds awesome. And if you can't play and find that range where it sounds awesome, you're just somewhere in the safe range, and it may be here, or maybe here, maybe here, but it's not here, and it has to be here. Now, that's a really vague, sweeping statement, and I don't have time to do 30 minutes of examples, but every tech who's also a player knows exactly what I'm talking about, and every player who's had a tech really make an amp sing for them knows what I'm talking about. But it's a very good question, Martin. Hey, K-Metal, I've seen that he's doing videos, but I've not watched any. I don't care. I've seen too much of the stuff that he's put out to care what he has to say about it. It makes me sound I'm the judgmental prick, but I'm also not the guy who puts for 40 years, whatever it's been, has put 50 years, has put 400 volt caps in places where there's 470 volts across them. So let's see. Hey, Nick Orr, can you guys hear me? I know I'm not as loud as I usually am. I can turn it up if I need to. Nick's got 2 deluxe reverbs. One is reissue that was built by his tech. They have the same speaker, no bright cap, but the 2016 build is much brighter with more bass. Anything I can look into with the build that may contribute to these differences? Much brighter with more bass. Well, I don't know what your tech did. I don't know whether your tech changed any values. I don't know if the circuit's exactly the same. I don't know if the speaker... I don't know if the tech put the bright cap in or the bright cap out. There's so many little things you can do, and the deluxe reverb radically changes the sound. Like if I change the 6.8K mids resistor to a 1.5K in that amp, the treble and bass controls do very different things to the player. So I'd have to look at each one. Or maybe they're running at different voltages as well, But the reissues are really good, and they can be made to sound like a good example of a real one. If someone's building one from scratch, I don't know what they've done. Hey, Lewis Sherwin. His Ailing Tweaker 15. He's replaced all the tubes. After a week or so, the sound starts dropping out while playing with a preamp into the effects return. Well, that's a good troubleshooting. It means that the problem's in the output. I'm afraid that I've seen enough Tweaker 15s with power transformer issues that might be the deal. But let me turn off the noise gate and mute the guitar. I can't tell you for sure that's what it is. I'm gonna get a little more close and personal since I'm doing this kind of voice today. So let's. Oh wait, I forgot. I need to do this. Watch this, guys. I'm a pro. All right, that's a bit too much though. That's better. Feels weird. All right. So I'd be suspicious of the transformers, but it could be a lot of things. It could be just a bad screen grid resistor or something causing your output section to not be happy. Thanks, Joe. It brings out my eyes, too. It's also because I woke up this morning and all my black T-shirts were dirty because I had forgotten to do laundry. And so my laundry pile was massive. And it's all being handled, so I had to put on a real shirt today. Damn it. Yeah, not just that, but any 64 Custom Deluxe Reverb Magisterium. Yeah, you'll see why in tomorrow's videos. There's such rip-off bad things. I feel sorry for everyone who's bought one. Hey, Breath Time Breath. You're welcome. Merlin does great stuff, and I'm glad to point people to him. I'd love to get him on the channel sometime, but I get the sense he's kind of a recluse. But Merlin, if you see this, or someone, if we have mutual people and someone tells you this, I'd love to have you on here and pick your brain. Hey, Captain Fineweather, the AC30 C1, did you mean S1? The C1 is just a 1x12 version of the existing AC30C, same as the C2 and C2X. It's all the same amp. That's a great amp. If you mean the S, I've not had the S on the bench. I think that the S is using a MOSFET for a couple of stages, the way that an LND 150 like they are in the AC10, but I've not had one in to confirm. Hey, Chris, thank you. You know, Brad and I don't wake up in the morning and think, hey, what amps can we shit on today? But, you know, there are fields when there are very subjective things. You know, is a Ferrari better than a Porsche, blah, blah, blah. And there are aspects of these kinds of things where it's just fucking objective. You know, when you're designing a car, there are a lot of things you can do to make it stylistically this way or that way. You have to make sure the engine block isn't going to crack the first time you crank the fucker. And that's not up to debate. And, you know, when it comes to electronics design with high voltage, high current devices, there are certain things you have to do and you have to know before you start to do it, let alone to sell it. So when we see the bad stuff that people pay, you know, for and get bent over for, it's irksome. Hey, Andrew W., it really depends on what your style is. You know, high gain, there's a lot of things. You know, that could be a Randall if you're really into like Dimebag Darrell, and solid state can be really reliable. That could be a Soldano SLO for a lot of people. Those are fantastic. Sir makes some high gain stuff, not full on metal, but higher gain like the PT100, which is an offshoot of the old Custom Audio Electronics Custom 100, whatever you called it. Those are fantastic. And Friedman's got so many good things. But I don't know which style of heavy you mean, high gain you mean. So I will say since Paul Lima just chimed in at the same time, he asked, any experience with Hughes and Kettner amps as far as quality? I'd say specifically not a Hughes and Kettner, because they cram everything but the kitchen sink in there. And they try to get the kitchen sink in too, and so many things in H&Ks go wrong, and the only parts available are from them in Germany, and they will charge you $400 for a part that their competitors would have charged like $20 for. And everything else on the market that does the same thing is $20, but because they use a different connector, $400. Thank you very much. If your name is not Alex Lifeson and you actually have to buy the damn things, avoid H&K guitar amps. But I'd look at Suhr, Friedman, Metro, Soldano, or various solid state things. And there's, for a lot of heavy metal stuff, the fractal stuff is phenomenal. A fractal rig, especially since you're probably going to use, if at a professional level, you're going to be doing a lot of in-ear stuff. Incredible stuff, and you're going to have all the benefits of a great high-gain amp, but you're not going to have the reliability, and you're not going to have the noise level unless you model in the noise floor. You can model the noise floor out if your pickups are quiet. Have I any experience with the new Marshall amps and pedals? No, I don't have any information on new Marshall amps or pedals. I'll care about them if customers bring them in, but I think Marshall got sold again. Wait, they just got sold again before I even finished the first sentence. So I don't know what's going on with Marshall. I don't think Marshall knows what's going on with Marshall. I imagine there's some guys there who would really like to do something good, but are probably being curtailed by management or the 5-year plans and shit like that. Hey, Robbie. Hey, Captain Grumpus, how do I adjust the bias of an amp if it has an external bias control knob? Well, I take the chassis out of the amp and I do my usual measurement stuff. And if I need to reach around the bottom to turn the pot instead of doing it inside, I do it that way. I have never found external bias measuring points to be useful to me. They're useful to owners because they're just measuring cathode current, which takes, you can factor in the plate and screen, but I like to be more accurate. I like to get just the plate current, not the screen current. So if an amp comes in, it's got an external bias control knob, I'll bias it like I always do. And I have been known to change out external. So I've had amps come in that actually just have regular pots for bias controls with a pot sticking out the back. And anyone can reach back to them and say, hey, what's this do? Terrible idea. I'll remove those when possible. It's like putting the ejector seat, the Bond thing. If you imagine if the ejector seat was right next to the parking brake. Hey, BC Electronics, I'm sorry you didn't get a notification. I put this up yesterday. The notifications rarely get me, or if they come, they come 5 minutes after it starts. Hey, Christopher Sambuco. Any tricks to clean dirty Fender grill cloth, the Silver 70s era type? Well, yeah. You can. The best bet would probably be take the speaker out and remove the the chassis, and use a steam cleaner, as long as it's quick, because you don't want to over steam the baffle. But I bet an easy steam cleaner with just a regular thing would take care of it. Other than that, you could try a very small amount of Simple Green mixed in with a lot of warm water, and just dab it onto the grill cloth and then let it dry in the sun. Or just have a dirty grill cloth. It's cool too. Captain Fineweather, you did mean the AC30S one, so my answer goes, I don't know. Yeah, T777. Yeah, I saw that video. I was disappointed in the Headstrong. Better than many kit builds, but man, it's just a shame. Princeton's such an easy circuit to get right. Thank you, Working Player 53. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Well, I get a lot more "you're an idiot, you suck" than I get "you're great," but I got to take them all in stride because I'm not an idiot. Don't usually suck, but I've got to ignore the praise as well because no one I can't even talk. No one knows who I am at the grocery store. Let's see. Hey, Greg Jonah. He wanted to learn more about cathode followers between a phase inverter and power tubes like an SVT. Where could I look? You want to go get Merlin Blenco's books, most likely. valvewizard.co.uk. He's got sections on preamp. He's got books on preamps, books on power amps. And if those aren't in deep enough for you, then you want the Jack Dar books or the Radiotron, what is it called? The Radiotron Radio Operators Manual, whatever, Volume 4 that's floating around out there. There are a lot of books out there from RCA and Radiotron and Jack Dar that go into real deep stuff. But in terms of examples of instrument amplifiers, I would say Merlin Blenco. You have the Merlin Blenco and you need more, or you have the old tube design books and you want more specific information. I'm trying to look at two screens at the same time. It's a very interesting subject, learning how to do all that stuff and learning how it works. I don't want to steer you too far down the wrong information, but a lot of the stuff with the cathode followers can also be done these days with MOSFETs instead of triodes for the cathode followers. Yes, a Radiotron Designer's Handbook. The 4th edition is in public domain. It's available all over the internet in PDF form. There's a lot of math in that, but it's the stuff that Merlin is coming from. Basically, you're changing, you're just looking at the cathode followers as, hey, these things are able to deal with a lot of current, put out a lot of current. It's kind of like a source follower in solid state. Brad will probably be able to explain that better than I am. Almost anyone can explain things better than I am today. I can't hear myself in my head. I don't hear, how we all have our internal voice. Mine's behind cotton today. So, and all of a sudden I'm, Hey, Christopher, any source for Mylar cups and picofarad values? Well, you can get polystyrenes if you want, but there's no point. You can find Mylar film caps in 1 nanofarad and a little bit smaller, but in general, the picofarad stuff is going to be the domain these days of ceramic and mostly ceramics in terms of production. Multi-layered dip ceramics are what people are using in other devices, and some of them, like the Muratas, sound fantastic for amplifier use. Hey, Winter Turtle, want to make one channel of an AB763 Marshally. Don't. It won't do it. You can't make a Fender into a Marshall. You can make it overlap a little bit with the JTM45, which is a copy of a Fender. If you want a Marshall, buy a Marshall. You want a Fender, use a Fender. Or, there's a lot of really good Marshall in a box pedals out there that will go plug in front of any AB763 and get you just as close. You'd have to change the entire output section and change the power supply to make an AB763 sound like a Marshall. Then you're starting from the wrong point. It's like if you want to make a grocery cart into a go-kart, well, you don't. You just build a go-kart to begin with. Let's see. I don't mean to be negative, but you need to know the starting point for something. If you want a Marshally sound, start with a Marshally output section and power supply. Mind flies. Any thoughts on the Marshall studio amps? They're overpriced junk in terms of the new production stuff. I would avoid all of them. For the same price, you can get a used Friedman that'll kill it. Eric Blaha, you will never regret that. You could get a 72 Princeton for what, in good shape for what they charge for the 64 Customs, and you have a real amp, and even buy one that's not in great shape. $300-400 later, you'll have a keeper for life that you won't need to service again for 20 years. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, man. BC Electronics, I cannot help you find a Bogner Alchemist power supply board. You can see if Bogner or Line 6 admit to making that thing, and if they have anything, but they're just crappy amps. I'm surprised that Bogner got dragged into that morass. Let's see. Hey, Joel Kaplan, he just finished a recap on an 88 Laney Pro AOR 100 head. I don't have a Variac, but I do have a light bulb limiter, 250. Yeah. I fired up without the tubes installed first, just to make sure you're not missing something huge. And if no problem with that, fire it up with tubes, and just one step at a time. Just when you power up with tubes, make sure you've got a load on the output. Hey, Hill, yeah, the gas is real on the K-line. It is a pretty thing. Magisterium, I think it's going to be staying, to be honest. The headstock is not my favorite shape. As someone who loves graphic design, the logo doesn't really do it for me. But, I have quite a few guitars here. I've played so many good guitars in my life. This is a really good guitar. Let's see. That was bridge pickup. Here's and if I change over, So I have two good sounding Strats. I mean, I've got a third Strat here, and it sounds good, but these two are better. This is the Eric Johnson. You can hear the strings on this are old. But this thing's just under 8 pounds, and it is a boat anchor in comparison. The K-line is so comfortable. And I think this is the better guitar of the two. And I've had that Eric Johnson as my main guitar for 19 years. And at first I'm like, yeah, this is a good guitar, whatever. So I made myself give it a fair shake, and I played it pretty much exclusively for a month. And now it feels so comfortable. I'll show you the Casino, Philip, when we do the next break. I'll change out to a Casino. But, people were slagging well, not many people, but some people were slagging the K-line video, the first one, because just jazz noodling on clean, well, how useless. Do you have any idea how hard it is to make the guitar sound that good? And consistently into Super Reverb at 2.5 or 3. It's just that guitar is really nice. It wasn't hiding behind any effects or gain. It was naked and unafraid. So I think it's going to have to find a way to stay. So if anyone wants to just hit me with a ton of massive super chats, thanks. Let's see. Have I heard of this G-Craft GC1 with 70-ohm speaker made for Joe Walsh? I have not randomly selected user. I think, did Joe Walsh pay $15,000 for it, or did they give one to Joe Walsh and then they're trying to make another one for get $15,000 for another one because Jay Walsh has one, a 70 ohm speaker. I have no idea. Imagine it's got a massive power transformer, but output transformer, but I don't know anything about G-Craft GC1. Hey, Jason, we can't talk, not Jason, Jason Bush. Super Reverb reissued vids, deflub and reliability mods done. Can I share the traces for the denoise? It is your gigging app now. Oh, the trace issues on the, mostly on the Deluxe Reverb. It's really hard to get the last of the noise out of the reissue Super Reverb stuff. They're really good amps, but they're not as quiet due to the board layout as the old ones. And I think it's beyond the scope of what I could give out. Basically, you'd have to have some stuff moved off board, or just live with a slight noise floor that no one hears once the hi-hats kick in. It's a good amp, and I would not hesitate to recommend one live. I can hear a little bit of hiss coming out of this 65, which is in great shape. Needs a new pair of output tubes. I'm waiting for the new Roach the new Roach is here. I'm waiting for the output tubes before I open it up. But even a good one, sometimes on the Reverb channel, you hear that it's on. Sometimes you don't. Most of the time you do. It's not objectionable on the Super Reverb either. Reissue. Hey, testing 1, 2. Yeah, check out the what was the video I did the other day where I was talking the video I have on AI and automatically dubbing my videos. Pros and cons. You can see how I like to straighten leads these days, and it works really well for me. Hey, my voice seems to be a little bit better. Huh. Wow. When you are driving, and like you go down into a valley, and all of a sudden your ears pop, and you can hear better than you could before. And before you didn't even realize you weren't hearing well, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the world's a much bigger place all of a sudden. Ta-da! My voice opened up. My throat opened up. My ears have opened up. I don't know what was causing that, but I will not miss it. So, wow, it'd be interesting to pause here and go back to the beginning of the live stream. Okay. Roll the leads between two flat steel blocks. Exactly, Greg. That's what I do. All right, I feel so much better. Okay. Wow, I didn't even realize how underwater I was feeling. Everything was very small and wah, 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 like Charlie Brown's parents. Let's see. Screaming Corpse Lord. Hey, welcome back. Screaming Corpse Lord. I love saying stuff like that. If I could recommend it, Amptech in the Montreal area, you're very welcome. The only Canadian guys I know, Alan Benoit, who I believe is in the Vancouver area, Dan Tramble, Dr. Dan Amps, who's up in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Chris Church Audio in Hamilton, Ontario. But I don't know anyone in Montreal specifically. Maybe Brad's got a Montreal hookup for you. Sorry. I try to know as many good techs as I can, but the world is a really big place. Hey, David, I've put Mercury tweaker transformers into tweakers, and the transformers are not always direct drop-ins. Some of them are, some of them are not. And it's very important that they be direct drop-ins because the tweaker is such a pain in the butt to take apart if you need to make any modifications to the chassis. I hate doing that, and I won't be doing that again. Williamson, what is the most common problem with Mesa Boogie amps? Typically, the biggest problems with Mesa amps are the diodes like to fry. The 400 volt caps have more than 400 volts across them and leak and buzz and cause all kinds of problems. They don't understand how impedances work, and they'll have honking huge resistors on the input of tube stages so that the clean channel is noisier than the dirty channel. The pots are absolute garbage. The jacks like to corrode. Tantalum capacitors, which always burn because they're rated for 16 volts, and sometimes they get 17 volts. And so what do? They blow up dramatically. In my Amps Under $1,000 video, I've got a little 3-minute section on why mesas are not your friend. Check that video out so I don't have to do the whole spiel right now. But it could be like a drinking game between me and Brad to see who can name as many mesa problems in 2 minutes as possible. I would win. Metroplex versus Friedmanplex. I don't know. Whichever one you like the sound of. They're both built really well. You like the sound of either. One of them might speak to you more than the other. George does great stuff. Dave does great stuff. They're going to be a little bit different. Yeah, Williamson is AmpTech recommends Amps Under $1,000. I've got Amps Under $500 of a text perspective and Amps Under $1,000 a text perspective, and I'll be doing Amps Under $2,000 soon. You heard it here most recently, at least. I probably heard it a year or two ago, but I've been meaning to get to it, and I'm going to force myself to get to it now that the market is stabilized. Of course, I just said that and watch the tariffs just fuck us all up. We'll find out. Most reissue amps from Fender seem to be all over the place from what I heard and saw. I don't think they're worth the money over here in Europe, to be honest. Working Player 53 says, I don't know what they cost in Europe. I will say that there are two main divisions of the Fender reissue amps. The 65 and the 68. The 68s are garbage. The 65 series are quite good. There's occasional outlier like the 59 Basement LTD, which predates the 65 reissues. It's kind of a different kettle of fish. It's good but not great, but can be made great. And then they have some weird things like the 63 Vibroverb / Vibro Lux Custom. It's not a very good amp as it's designed. It can be made all right. But all those things are presented to player as the Fender reissue series. So I would specifically say the 65 reissues. That's the Deluxe Reverb, the Princeton Reverb, Super Reverb, and Twin Reverb. Those are really good reissues for the money, at least in the States. I don't know what prices would be like in Europe. Sorry. I have not worked on a John Suhr Jim Kelly reissue amp. I've had a Kelly amp in, and I've had Suhr amps in, and I know John, but I've not had a Suhr Kelly reissue amp in. But knowing John and having been into Kelly's amps, I imagine it'd be splendid, and probably knowing Jim Kelly, also very heavy, unless John won that argument. I've not seen blue film caps that are called MF630 volt 0.1. Sorry. So I have to look them up, and I don't have time right now. What is my favorite effects loop design? Whose design is my favorite? My favorite is a tube-based effects loop that Klaus Holm Jensen designed, and I tweaked a little bit. It takes 2 triodes to pull off, and it's about as good as I found out there. Almost everyone is doing. There are a lot of amps that have a passive insert loop, which is a send return jack right before the input of the phase inverter, and you'll find that in like Dr. Z's, and that's a crappy high impedance thing that shouldn't be used unless you use it with an external buffer. Almost everyone is doing variations on the MOSFET L&D 150M effects loop, and that's going to be the Friedman, the Friedman's got the same thing pretty much as the Metro's got, and they're good. They work really well. They have to be tweaked, and MOSFETs are not ultra mega reliable. Neither are tubes. So if you had the one that I used to do with the 12AX7, you might have to change out that tube once in a while, but changing a 12AX7 takes 3 minutes versus desoldering and replacing a MOSFET. I'm not a huge fan of any of those, but they're all fine. I'm not a fan of effects loops. I think if you really want the best effects loop for live use, probably the Steve Fryette, the Fryette Power Station 100. You just take your amp, your speaker signal and splits it off to effects, and then goes out to a separate power amp for that, and then you just have your dry cab and you wet stuff to the sides of it. But that's I like effects in front of an amp best. I think it's a little more of an organic experience. Either that or go full tilt studio approach where you're running the sound of the microphone through the effects, not running the sound of the effects through the microphone, through the speakers. Do you want to have the sound of your amplifier in a cathedral, or the sound of a cathedral coming through your amp speakers? But if you have the Friedman, if you have the Metro, they're fine. They're good examples of a basic, good, clean effects loop that works for most players. I know that Dave and George would also agree that it's best not to use them, but they put them there because people want them. Hey, Dale Boyle Music, that's too big a question. He's got a Dr. Z-Lux recently, and low bedroom volumes. It was noticeably noisier than a car Super B. The Z-Lux does have a fan. What other aspects impact an amp's noise for? It can be a lot of things. It can be the shielding. It can be the tightness of the hardware. It can be the circuit design. I could be here for 30 minutes naming random things off. See if you can just turn off the fan or unplug the fan, though. Fans are rarely necessary in amplifiers, and they do make noise and they attract dust. Hey, Eric Blaha. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy that Swart a lot. I've got a good friend, Andy, phenomenal musician up in Brooklyn. He got the little Swart Atomic Space Tone Jr. on my recommendation because he wanted to have something to keep in his living room for practice, and that his wife wouldn't object to the size and cosmetics of it. And he just loves it. And he's got a basement full of 100-watt Parks and Marshall super basses and various things that I've put together and cleaned up and restored for him. And so he's got, he could compete with Spinal Tap for volume if he wanted to. And he loves that little Swart from when he goes upstairs. Upstairs, that's his upstairs amp. And then he goes down to his basement of doom, which is a tricky thing to pull off in Brooklyn. So mad respect to you, Andy. Valve Wizard recommends a 100 ohm resistor from PT center tap to ground as cheap insurance. I cordially disagree with him in this instance because it's one more thing to fail that probably wouldn't fail normally. But it's going to depend on the circumstance. If you've got a bias derived from the HT supply, which a lot of amps do, then I think it's a terrible idea, because if that center tap opens up, then the bias goes crazy high, and you can burn a component in your bias supply. So I prefer not to fuse center taps or have a fusible resistor as a center tap. I prefer to if I wanted to achieve the same thing, I might do series resistance on the secondary rather than the secondary center tap. But when you do, so every time you add resistance there, you're any way you do it, you're going to be generating heat when you do that. But you're also going to be changing the sound and feel and response of the amplifier. So there's no free lunch. If you do this, it'll also do this. And if you do this, it'll also do this. And you just got to find the balance that works for you. So it's not a flat out bad idea, and it's not a flat out something that needs to happen. But if you're going to do a 100 ohm resistor, 100 ohm resistor on your heater center tap to ground. Oh, it's on this heater center tap. Okay, sorry. I can't make this any larger on my screen, and I need new glasses. I wouldn't. No, I don't. I don't think that's a good idea. Still, because I don't like having a physical center tap connected to the chassis at all. I would just prefer to use artificial center tap and float any existing physical center tap. That way, you're not going to have a possible way of burning the power transformer. So 200 ohm half watt resistors to ground from either side of the heater supply and leave any center tap disconnected. Sorry. And that's if you go to ground. You can also go to a negative DC voltage or even to a positive DC voltage, but that's outside the scope of this article. All right, we are coming up almost to the top of the hour. We'll do a 7-minute intermission then. Let's see. Let's see what else I can get in here. Hey, Stephen George, I'm glad that helped you. What tube set do I recommend that's under $200? A tube set for a deluxe reverb, under $200. Well, depends on what needs to be changed. Like, you don't need to change it all at once, but $200 will just pretty much get 2 output tubes for like $70, and then maybe a rectifier. Probably okay with the rectifier. 2 or 3 preamp tubes. So the biggest change you're going to get in a deluxe reverb are going to be V1, V2, and V4, the 3 7025s. I like the Electro Harmonix 7025s. You could also save some money and get the JJ ECC 83s, and just hope that you get ones that are quiet. And a pair of Electro Harmonix 6v6s are probably your best bet. So that would probably be your $200 right there. If you find a full set of 6 preamp tubes, a rectifier tube, and 2 output tubes for under $200, that's your free lunch, and you won't enjoy that. You get what you pay for. What is it? Buy once, cry once. Hey, Mark Larkin's Music. He's got a Fender Deluxe Reverb Silver Face amplifier. Great for stage. Can I add a low impedance output jack to allow for studio work line in? Don't. That'd be a big expense, and you would not enjoy the sound doing that. If you want to do that, go get a reactive load box. I think the Fractal one starts at like $250. And you can go up to the SUR non-IR, just passive reactive load for like $250, $300, and then the IR loaded model is like $500, and then the Fryette stuff and the Oxbox are about $1,200, $1,400. But just there are a lot of really good, well done load boxes these days, starting with the Fractal, then the SUR. Either one of which is going to give you the result you want without a permanent modification to your amp, without just going through a passive voltage divider and causing heat issues. It's also going to sound good, not sound bad. So we are right here at the top of the hour now. Here's my chance to sing Smelly Cat. I will skip my chance to sing Smelly Cat. I think I want you to know that I always have a chance to sing it, and I always choose not to. And that's the kind of guy I am, and that's the service I provide you guys. So we're going to take a 7-minute intermission, and when I come back, I'll get out that casino for everyone to hear, or at least the one guy who wanted to hear it. It only takes one person to give me an excuse to play a guitar. So I'll talk to you guys in a minute. Thanks. think I was saying something about the weather changing a lot. This guitar agrees. It was down a full half step. A full half step? That was brilliant. Wow. It was down a little bit more than a half step. Not from tuning, but from weather changes. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Unlike some guitar channels, I'm pretty fastidious about tuning. It drives me nuts. Cannot stand the sound of an out-of-tune guitar unless your name is Lou Reed and it's 1968. In which case you get a pass. Why do I have no sound? Huh. Something's up with this volume pump. Nothing on the bridge. So much for my really wonderful wiring job I did, I guess. It came back, so I'll figure that out. To do that with the major with the flat nine. The amp is not set for that. The amp is not set for that. I've got a noise gate on the vocal mic when the guitar is playing. Sorry. Otherwise, you get it through both mics and it gets weird sounding. But if I'm not playing and I talk, it's fine. And if I play and don't talk, it's fine. But when I forget and try to mix it up. How slight is the carve? Not too slight, not as much as a real, I mean, it's not carved as much as a real, say, 63, 64 example, but it's not a flat top like you get. It's not like flat like the PRS SE is flat compared to a real PRS. Let me think. Wow, it held up just fine. You know, you know, starts about 3,200. I've got about 750 total into this. They're both really damn good guitars. I obviously have not been playing this week because my right hand kept fighting the Gibson where the strings are. But if I play this for 30 minutes before going live, I'm pretty comfortable on it too. It's a very, very nice guitar. In the other room is the 335 historic 63 blah blah blah, which is also a very nice guitar. A little more comparable in build to the K-line, but you know, I like them all. They have to be good for me to keep them. Let's see. Hey, Anthony R. says the deluxe reverb, he's got a deluxe reverb built by a tech many years ago. The reverb still bleeds through a little bit with the reverb control all the way down. Any idea how to troubleshoot? Well, what tech built it? Can you contact them? You know, if it's a working deluxe reverb that is just what Fender built, then I know all the variables, but I don't know what your tech did, whether it's an actual deluxe reverb or whether he had some good ideas or ideas. You know, good ideas, notions, it's very subjective. But in general, if you have the reverb at 0 in a healthy deluxe reverb, you will not hear any reverb coming through at all. Unless you have the normal channel up and a little bit is bleeding through that just because the tank can vibrate as the speakers vibrate. But, you know, first thing to make sure is the reverb pot fully grounded? If it's not fully grounded, that could be the cause. Hey, Anthony R. Would I consider doing a rate my build thing where people send me pictures of amps and get me to rate them? No, it'd be great for clicks on videos and stuff, but I don't have the time, and it would just be a string of hurt feelings and burnt bridges, all in the search for clicks, and I just can't entertain that. Sorry. And really, for me to actually look at someone's build and rate it, that's constructively, it falls in the realm of consultation, and that's something I would need money for first. Do I have any experience with PV Valve Kings? Yeah, but it's been a really long time. I don't remember which model that is. Sorry. Heavy-ass things, as I recall. Why would someone add 2 additional 6L6 tubes to a 1968 Super Reverb? Because they don't understand how transformers work and that you would need to change the power transformer and output transformer. And just get a damn twin to begin with. Hey, Don, thank you. Why would a Haybor output transformer sound different than Mercury? Well, it's not just that a Haybor may sound different from Mercury. 2 Haybors may sound different from each other. 2 Mercuries may sound different from each other. They're like what a handy prop. A transformer is, in essence, much like a pickup. It has wire wound around a core with magnetic core, with magnets and metals and stuff. And it's very rare for each one to have the exact same number of wire, or for the wire to be wound in exactly the same way. So in a transformer, you're going to have variation. We're used to the variation in pickups, and the variation can be minor or major. I'd be interested to know if you could hook up the same amplifier with switches to go between this transformer and this transformer, Mercury and Haybor, with all other things being the same, and have someone else flip the switch while you're playing, if you could do that safely, whether you'd be able to predictably choose which one you're hearing, whether those, because there could be variation between amp A and amp B just based on fluctuations in voltage or parts tolerances. So the amps can sound slightly different, and you think the only difference is the transformer, it could be something else. But if you had the same amp, hot switching safely between output transformer A and output transformer B, how often could you correctly identify A versus B if someone else was doing the switching and you could not see that? That'd be the only real test. In the short term, though, with that minus scientific blind testing, if you like one better, you like one better, even if it's for other reasons. If it's for other reasons, get in there and measure voltages and stuff. But, correct output transformer primary impedance for a set of 6V6s or 6L6s can be within a range of, 1 kilo ohms. So 5.3K on this one, 5.7K on the other one. They're both in the correct range, but they're going to sound different. Hey, Chris R. I don't know if it was just a momentary thing. I still have the sinuses, but my voice seems to have recovered from whatever spasms it was undergoing earlier. He's got a top hat King Royale with a line out level pot at the bottom of the chassis he never uses. Would a Larimar Master Volume be worthwhile? Yes, but Brian at Top Hat has very specific preferences when it comes to master volumes in his amps. And if you ever plan on reselling the amp, but you really need a master volume, you might be better off asking Brian if he could add one. If not, or if he's not willing to, or you don't ever plan on selling the amp, yes, you can have a good tech put in a Larimar master volume there. But in terms of if you need a master volume, but you might sell the amp at some point, reach out to Brian and see what his vote is for, whether he might do the work for you. He's a good guy. He and I have very polite differences of opinion about how best to implement a master volume, but it's literally his name on that. So his vote counts, I think. Hey, Jeff Motter, any opinions on the Magnatone Super 15? I don't know. Is that the one that I already had on the channel about 3 years ago? Magnatones are fine. I don't have any problem with Magnatones, except for they have a model with the EL84 cathode bias, and they bias them too hot. I just chilled that bias back down to 14 watts idle, and it was a good amp at that point. Unless the client brings in a Magnatone, I'm not going to bring one into the channel. Yeah, Pastor Bent on it just discovered an important part of life. Yeah. That meme out there of this woman with safety glasses in a very science-looking lab, soldering very nicely, very photogenically. And she's holding the soldering iron like this. Oh. I was going to say, for those who couldn't see that, she's holding it like this, like it's a pencil. No more hand if that were on. And this thing is just kind of loose. So. Just a second, I need to fix this while I'm thinking about it. Otherwise, I'll forget that it's loose, and I'll power it on and drop a scalding hot tip on myself. There we go. This is the 80 watt. This is the one you never want to ever touch under any circumstances. Where were we? Let's see. Also, Pastor, first pants, then shoes. Let's see. Thank you, Richard. I'm glad. I hope that everyone finds it useful. And like Jason was saying, I'm aware that I'm putting stuff out there for younger me's to find, because this is a vanishing art and skill set and I'm not the only one who has this, but I'm one of the ones who is documenting it in a form that most people can consume. So I hope, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, or if I retire in 20 years, that everything I've learned doesn't just disappear. So, hey, Jay Singleton, how much money to make a stock 68 Fender Deluxe Reverb custom reissue solid from all the factory assembly problems? Well, I'm of two minds on this. First of all, I don't like giving out rates, because if someone sees a rate from 2025 in 2028 and they want me to still charge the old rate, while everything is going up in price. So rates change. Second of all, I cannot accept it one in right now. I've got so much stuff I'm still working through before I take anything else in. But typically that'd be about $250. If $350 tops, it's not that expensive. Thanks, Jeff Dorman. Appreciate that. Thanks for being you with hearts popping out of his eyes. That sounds painful. Ouch. Oh. Thank you, Jeff. Working player 53 on a scale of 1 to 12. How about have an idea? Would it be to order something like a 5F6A Bassman? If I never built together a two band, if I never put together a two band before, I can't talk. Usually 12 to 15 for most people, but you may be uniquely adept at this kind of thing. Some people have a knack for it. I had a client who was here this morning, and he's been doing some of his own work, and he's doing pretty well, but he has an innate knowledge of systems from having done carpentry and metalwork. So if you have a systemic approach to things, and this and this and this, and it's a whole process, once your mind is used to thinking about things like that, it's not that difficult. And then I've got a lot of people I've met, I wouldn't trust them to open an umbrella around me, So you have to be honest with yourself. I think for most people, tube amps are not something to learn on. I usually tell people build a whole bunch of pedal kits. When every pedal you make works the first time, and everything looks great, and there's no burnt wires, and you don't have to go back and fix a bunch of mistakes, and crucially, you begin to understand what does what in the pedal. At that point, you're ready to deal with higher voltage and currents and maybe build a Champ, not a 5F6A Bassman. But that said, you may just be uniquely good at this kind of thing, so you might have no problem with it. Hey, Richard, the Duck's here. The Duck's always here. There are people much closer to home to negotiate with than Putin. Sadly, this thing is so useful. We need to name the Duck. Shall we start a Name the Duck contest? Winner gets bragging rights. Viaduct. I'm not going to fall into Marx Brothers routine just for your amusement. Fool me, ain't no Santa Claus. Let's see. Dave Saka says, I installed a Dr. Tube JMC 2000 stable bias mod and a TSL 100. That's a ripoff kit. The only fix for a JCM 2000 is to replace the entire board. The stable bias mods don't work. The entire board is prone to becoming conductive, not just the bias. So even if you were to magically fix the bias issue, every other part of that board, which has voltage and current, is going to leak into every other part. It is a bad board. The only fix is to replace the entire board. Now, Marshall no longer has those boards available. But my buddy Brad here went through the trouble of making replacement PCBs for the TSL 100 and DSL 100. Brad's Guitar Garage, you see him here on the chat. If you go to his website, hopefully he'll put the link here, you can order them. But you cannot fix the stock board. You can only replace it with the version 21 Marshall board, which is no longer available, or Brad's much, much better board. So that would be the thing. Everything else gets you where you are right now, and you spent money to trade off one set of problems for another. Sorry, I'm really sorry. The 50 is not as bad as the 100. And the fish, we're talking about the JCM 2000 DSLs. The new ones that they have out that are called DSLs, those are not the JCM 2000s. So the modern, if you go to Marshall's website now or Sweetwater and look up the DSLs, those are not the JCM 2000 DSLs. We're looking at the JCM 2000 model, TSL, triple super lead, and DSL, double super lead from the JCM 2000 series. Those are the problematic ones. Sorry to tell you that, Dave. Thanks, Blues R Us. Appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, you're trying to fix your buddy's amp. Yeah, that kit's a ripoff. I'm sorry. Yeah, the H is. Yeah, I've had the H in the fish. The H is a fine little Marshall. It doesn't have any problems with that. It may or may not aesthetically work for you, but it does what it says on the tin. It doesn't want to blow up. Victor speaks truth here. That's why he bought a Germino. Those things are really, really one of the best built amps on the market. I'm a great big fan of Greg's work, but I'm working on it. Hey, motor amps, any good mods worth doing to a JTM45 circuit? It depends. Does it sound like you want it to sound? If not, is what you want it to sound like a realistic goal for a JTM45, or is that not the right amp for you? I've got speaking of Germinos and speaking of mods on JTM45s, look at the Germino videos I have on the channel. I've got two where a customer bought a Germino JTM45 and thought it sounded too dark because it sounded like an early JTM45, and it turns out he was looking for a slightly later JTM45 sound because Marshall was changing those 3 years of production. And so I changed out 2 resistors and 2 capacitors and got him the amp that he thought he wanted to begin with. But it still sounds like a JTM45 and does not sound like even a 1987, let alone a DSL. So be sure you know what the amp is capable of. And sometimes you just need to learn the amp really well. If I had a brand new JTM45 here, my first thought would not be I need to start changing things. My first thought was I need to see how many different sounds I can pull out of this thing with the guitars I already have, and really learn the circuit, and then say, all right, I know this well. I know what it does. I know what its strengths and weaknesses are. I wish this were a little more X or a little less Y, and go from that point of view. Bottom Kitchen, I'm not sure about whether larger shops have to use lead-free. I know you have to use lead-free if the amp is for export, but I'm not sure if that applies to repair. And I imagine, if I were doing a warranty service where amps were coming in and needed to be EU compliant on the way out, I'd have a separate bench with a different iron and a full set of lead-free stuff. But I have been offered warranty service by different companies, and I've turned them down because you've got to spend all your time in paperwork and argue about every charge and get paid pennies of what your time is worth, and then get paid on a 90-day billing cycle, etc. No. It's just, Ryan, how did I get asked question, please? Just ask a question, and if I get to it before the end of the question, before I get to the end of the chat, I'll answer it. But I answer them pretty much in the order they come in. It's just, Ryan. I mean, I saw yours just now, so I went ahead and answered that, but that won't count towards answering your question. Put your question here. When I get to it, I get to it. If the lead-free stuff was good, I'd be using it. It's not as good for this stuff as leaded. It's not a good format for high-temperature stuff that gets vibrated. And I don't have to please EU regulations, and I'm trying very hard to keep lead out of the landfill. I don't want any lead in our landfill. So the lead I put in amp is to keep that amp from going to the landfill. I have no experience with or opinion on the Chris Stapleton 62 signature Princeton amp, but I like Chris Stapleton. And from what I can tell as a person, I think he's a talented songwriter and sounds good. And I hope the amp is great, but I don't have any experience with it. Richard says, I think the fact that I didn't groove with the 68 reissue Princeton and sold it was a good decision based on what I've learned from watching Lyle. Well, maybe your timing just sucks, Richard. Shh. Hey, working player 53, if you got your old Strat and made a parts caster and it's working for you, that's awesome. You know, it's not about having X brand or Y brand or anything. When you find a really good guitar, I don't care what it costs. Like I said earlier, that Casino, I've got $700, $750 total in it. And this K-Line, I'm going to have considerable more into it. They're both great guitars, but, you know, doesn't mean that the K-Line is X dollar amount percentage better than that particular Casino. A lot of Casinos out there are dogs. This is a good one. Most K-Lines are really good. This is another good one. But this one really speaks to me, and it matches my watch. Let's see. We take off that. Let's see. All right, U2WB. I got to use Super Reverb and I got to use Fender Super Reverb, and the sound is all distorted as if the speakers blown is this common. It may not be the speakers. It may be the speakers. You may have one or more bad output tubes. Now, if you have, that amp has two output tubes. One pushes, one pulls. And if one of them is defective, you're going to get Class B, low output, lots of distortion. It's going to sound terrible. It could also be a bad preamp tube. You can see if plugging into the normal channel rather than the reverb channel suddenly sounds good. So I don't have enough information to tell you what it really is. It can be bad speakers. More often it's one or more bad output tubes. Sometimes it's just a bad preamp tube. But see if you can take it to a guitar store you trust or someone with more experience close to you and see if they can help you troubleshoot it. It may be that you need 4 new $100 speakers. It may be that you need a new set of $80 output tubes, or you may just need to change out one $20 preamp tube, and life is good. But I hope it's simple and inexpensive for you, but it's not anything I would particularly worry about just based on that problem description. It's probably something fairly simple. Now you got a transatlantic. Hey, Stephen Kirkpatrick. So the reverb in my 64 Custom hand-wired deluxe reverb that sounds very dark, and swapping the 12 AT7 didn't change it, nor did playing it through another reverb tank. All right, well. I got one of them right here. Let me take a look at something. This one doesn't have a cap across the reverb return. A lot of Fender Deluxe reverbs, especially in the 70s, would add a 2.2 picofarad cap on the, back then it was on an RCA jack, now it's on the stereo quarter-inch. They'd often have a cap to ground off the reverb return, which feeds the grid of V4A. This one doesn't have it. That does not mean that yours doesn't have it. This thing's been modified by the previous tech, so there might have been a cap 2.2 nanofarad or even greater on yours. I've not seen the schematic for this. So that's the first thing I would check to make sure the return isn't dampened by that. Beyond that, the reverb circuit in here is pretty much the exact same thing you'd find in a real deluxe reverb. So I don't know what to tell you. unless you've got a faulty capacitor or leakage in a board somewhere, where you can have a capacitance thing or a voltage leak. But I at least looked. But look and see if there's a cap from the stereo 1/4-inch jack to ground. It's on the yellow wire in this one that goes to pin 2 of V4A. Hey, Philip, we need a current pedal board video. Well, the pedal board so far is the same as you saw it last time, but when I mythically find time, I'm going to change it around, because I found that I really like the stomp pedals, overdrive pedals in the HX Stomp, but I'm not a big fan of the amp models or the cab models, and I think this does a better job of that. So this is going to go where the pedals are on my board, and I'm going to get one of those small 2 push button things that sits on top of the HX Stomp. So I have 5 control foot switches on the Stomp, then this, and then just the tuner, which is also a buffer. And I like to have the tuner buffer separate from the tuner in this, separate from the tuner and the HX Stomp. First of all, because right now I'm plugged into my pedal board, and it's going into the tuner, and then through the 2 overdrive pedals, which I have off right now, and then out of the pedal board to the amp. So I'm not going through any of the digital stuff today. I'm just using it as a buffer and a tuner, which is great for doing my videos. But this way I would have the ability to keep all my amp modeling in this and turn off the amp modeling instantly and just have the effects. So I don't have to like make 4 different versions of every kind of sound I want to get. I could just bypass this entirely, use this, the HX Stomp as pedals in front of an amp. Call up an overdrive pedal, a chorus, and a delay or whatever. But I have not had time to play with that. I don't know what made me sadder watching the K-Line demo, my tone or my playing. Yeah, Logan just he sucks, doesn't he? He sucks, and it's depressing how bad he is, and especially in person. And you just sit there and watch him play all this stuff and think, why does he even pretend? We can all see through him. God, he's got such a nice touch. And a good S-style guitar into a 65 Super Reverb is just really nice. And that Super Reverb, I mentioned in the video, I don't know if anyone picked up on that, it doesn't have the original speakers, but it has the Mojo Tone Alnico 10s that they have now. Those things sound really damn good. So if anyone from Mojo Tone sees this, good job. Am Barber just got a Fender Deluxe Reverb with a ticking noise. What is causing this, and is an easy fix to repair? If you have the foot switch plugged in, turn off the vibrato, see if the ticking goes away. Sometimes the vibrato causes a ticking, and you can see in my videos how to fix that. I put a 10 nanofarad across the roach. You can see that in most of the videos on the 60s and 70s Fenders on the channel. If the ticking is there, and that in that case the ticking would change in time to the speed knob on the front. If that's not the cause, look at my video on easy mods owners can do to their reissue Fenders. It's my Fender reissue playlist. Could just be loose hardware somewhere. Make sure that it's not just like your Wi-Fi router or your security system or some electronic noise in your vicinity. Make sure that the noise is there when nothing's plugged in. What are the differences and benefits of wiring 2 8-ohm speakers in parallel versus series? Well, in parallel, they're going to be 4 ohms. In series, they're going to be 16 ohms. As far as difference in sound, depending on what transformers driving them, they'd sound the same. In terms of the power distribution, and if they're both rated for the same, they're going to be okay. You definitely wouldn't want to have say if you had a 100-watt amp, you wouldn't want to be running a 25-watt speaker and a 75-watt speaker at the same time in parallel, because the 25-watt one would die. And if you ran them in series, You probably don't want to run the 25 watt first in series, but in general, it's best to have both speakers equally matched and up to the total load. In general, you have to look at the failure mode. What happens if you're playing two speakers in series and one of them goes out? Then you have no speakers, you have no load. You could damage your amp. If you have two speakers in parallel and one goes out, you may have a mismatch. You only have one speaker operating, but you're still going to have a load. And as long as it's not like a 25 watt speaker with a 50 watt Marshall, in which case one speaker may not last that long, in which case you could still lose your load. In general, parallel is safer than series, but sonically, probably not going to hear a difference. Or if you do, are you really going to be hearing a difference? Or are you thinking you are because you've made a change? Hey, Screaming Corpse Lord, yeah, I don't love the headstock and I don't love the logo. I don't. But this is a remarkably good guitar. And I can just edit out the video so you don't see the headstock. See? That all look cool now? It is purely aesthetics. And it took me a while to even consider the possibility that this was an acceptable guitar, because aesthetics matter to me almost as much as everything else. But, it's, maybe it'll grow on me the way the rest of the guitar has. The headstock's not bad. It's not ugly. It's just not cool. And the logo is, I don't want to argue with Chris in public like this, or I'll argue with him to his face. It's not my aesthetic. But then again, I'm looking at where it says Super Reverb amp on this old 65 Fender. The graphics on these old Fenders are horrible. Just horrible. But we're used to those ugly, horrible logos and graphics on the Super Reverb. So isn't it weird how, we don't even question that, if you really look at how the graphics are done on an old black panel Fender, it's kind of weird. If that were new on the market, you'd say, who the hell designed that? So anyway, let's see. Hey, Jess, his Marshall JMD combo occasionally shuts off and turns on again by itself, and you hear about this sort of thing. Could have a faulty power switch. I don't know what the JMD is, but the power switch might be faulty. U2WB, I already answered your question about the Super Reverb and the distortion. You have to wait for me to get to them. It takes me a while to get to your question. When you ask a question, I can be like 30, 40 minutes before I get to it by this point in the chat. Same for It's Just Ryan. I'll get to you. I will. Hang out, be patient, be cool. You might learn some other stuff. Not just from me, but a lot of really knowledgeable people on here. It's a good group of people. If I wasn't talking, I'd still join just to see what everyone has to say. And Philip, I already answered your question on the Super Reverb with extra tubes. Please, everyone, put question marks before your questions, and please, 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 please ask any question once, because if I see the same question more than one time, I think, did I scroll wrong? And I got to make sure where I am. It just really slows everything down. I will answer the question when I get to it, and not before then, unless I really like you. Hey, local Christian rock guitarist. I have no thoughts on redoing my best amps under $500 video unless the market changes remarkably a lot. There are a lot of amps I'm seeing there in that range I didn't receive mention. PRS Sonzera, Orange OR15 Tiny Terrace. I mentioned the Tiny Terrors and stuff and the amps under $1,000 because they're at the time that they were over $500. PRS Sonzeras are terrible. OR15s are not great. Tiny Terrors are not great. I specifically warned against some of those things in the amps under $1,000 video. If a new amp under $500 hits the market, I might do an updated version. Generally, if I The amps in those videos fall into two categories. Amps I can either really recommend for the price or really want to warn you away from for the price. And everything else on the market, if I don't mention it, it's not worth recommending at the very least. And I'd say the Sonzeras towards the avoid, and the OR15 and Tiny Terrors are towards the recommended, but not really there yet. I can't cover every amp on the market. First of all, I don't have experience with every amp on the market. Second of all, it'd be basically reading through like Sweetwater's site and saying, yes, no, you're fucking crazy. Oh, that's a nice one. And, it'd take 45 minutes and no one would get anything other than, hey, this dude is just saying yes, no. So I gave very specific information and reasons. Could the change in voice be caused by posture? I find that usually the case for me. Oh, my beloved ice cream bar. Let's see. Do I have any thoughts on spline heads? I've not had a spline in, I don't think. Brad has. Brad said they're built well inside, I believe. Hey, Jason iMusic, what must one own if they have soldering skills and know how to use a multimeter and who have done basic component replacement but tube biasing, want to do more involved? What must one own? A sense of humor, a first aid kit, a basic set of tools. Maybe one day I'll do a little tour of the bench and show you the stuff I use all the time, the most common stuff. Some of it you can see in the working videos. Hey, Gabriel Luis, thank you for joining us. First time you see the man behind the voice, as long as you don't see the man behind the voice. So Jason iMusic, maybe I'll do a video on stuff I wish I'd had when I was starting out, but a lot of it's stuff you can get at any hardware store. Buy as many different screwdrivers as possible. A bunch of common socket sizes like 11 millimeter, 10 millimeter, half inch, adjustable pliers, adjustable wrench, wire strippers, get good ones, good needle nose, good larger pliers, etc. And just buy the best tools you can. You will never regret buying good tools. You will always regret, oh, goddamn, this crappy piece of shit did this to me. And knowing the difference between a number 1 and a number 2. Over there is number 3 Phillips head screwdriver. Same for flatheads. I do an awful lot of work with this little hardened steel flathead. The tip's all rounded over on one corner from using it so much to scratch chassis to do solder joints to them. I need to replace it. Hardened steel is the way to go. And these little Exolite snippers, these little Exolite clippers are fantastic because you can cut flush, very, very flush, and they're very sharp, and they don't have any notches in them from being used on guitar strings. I have different ones I use on guitar strings. And I love this little engineer solder sucker. This is the SS03. But, maybe I'll do a video not just because it'll give me something people would click on, but might be of actual instructive use to people out there. Maybe I'll say I'm gonna give myself a budget of $40. How many tech tools can I find at Home Depot or Lowe's? Let's go. I'm gonna just go and do it on my phone or whatever. People like videos like that. Maybe then I can unbox them. I hate unboxing videos. I have no idea why they're so popular. Let's see. We're coming up on the next hour, so my back teeth is floating. I'm not a big fan of Engel amps, Tony Todd. Sorry, I've seen inside a lot, and I cannot recommend Engels. And I'm sorry to say that. I know they're very common, especially in Europe, and they're very popular with certain genres. But I don't think they're a good brand from what I've experienced. Hey, Chris Russell, thank you very much for that. I'm very, very glad. Yeah, the stock tubes are like, I don't. Sometimes I don't understand companies. I do understand this case because they're trying to make sure the amp works, and whatever tubes they put in there has to be a certain price point, and then those tubes, when they're working at the factory, has to be shipped 2,000 miles to the European distributor, then 1,000 miles from there to where you are. So those tubes have a lot of miles and a lot of vibrations, and they weren't expensive to begin with because they just need to have a tube in there where you can turn on the amp and it turns on. That same amp that sounded harsh and piercing, put in the JJs, and JJs are not phenomenal tubes. They're just very good. That's all it takes. It's very good. Something that doesn't actively interfere with making music. So I'm very glad you're happy. It's a very nice amplifier. And if you have the either the C2 or the C2X, whether it's Screenback or the Blue, if you like it now, play it every day. Some point, if you play it every day for a couple hours, some point in the next couple weeks, it'll open up. That speaker will go, "Oh, this is where I live now." It's kind of like earlier when my head cleared out, and it'll just bloom. Let's see. Thanks, Chris Russell. Oh, what are my thoughts on the Fender Tone Master series, Philip Madrigal? I've got a video called "Let's Talk About the Tone Masters," and the video called "Amp Snob Tries a Tone Master," and everything I said in those two videos. The video I said we need to talk about the Tone Masters was I was just looking at the specs and looking at how they were built, and all those predictions have come true. They're failing prematurely, and then everything I said in the demo video where I tried one at a Guitar Center has no headroom. It's like it's got a built-in bad compressor pedal. As soon as you dig in, it goes. But if you play clean, it's a nice sounding amp, and it's got a beautiful clean sound, a beautiful reverb. So for some players, it's just going to be nothing but joy. But if you were to try to play a hard blues on that thing without a pedal, it's just going to fart out and squash you down. Amps under $250,000. Good Lord. Amps under $250,000. I would get a Katana 50 and move to the fucking French Riviera for a year. That's what I'd do for amps under $250,000. Right? Yeah, Dan Lurie does fantastic work. I didn't know how close he is to Montreal, but Dan does great work. He's semi-retired, though. But see if you can get in touch with him. Hey, Honey Wagon. Static is not uncommon, especially on guitars with plastic pick guards like a Strat, especially if the inside is not fully shielded. And the fix for that is to go to the kitchen and get a dryer anti-static sheet and just wipe it down, and it'll take all that static out. And if it happens a lot, you can loosen the pick guard. Next time you change strings, take the pick guard off, put a dryer sheet underneath it so it's contacting the metal foil here, and put this thing back in place, and you should be fine. Those things really do work. I'm not even sure how, but they do. Do I know any amp techs in the Northern California area? Sorry, Horace. I'm so behind on emails, and it's a bad joke at this point. I'm sorry that I didn't see your email. I get so much spam every day. I take stuff in from around the country, but I've not been accepting any work for the last month, pretty much, except for people who are already existing clients, because I'm full up. I can only have so many amps here at once. Northern California area, not specifically. I know some people in Oregon, and lots of people around LA. But sorry, yeah, unscented dryer sheet. Queen's Hillbilly is absolutely right. So I gave the same advice an hour after everyone else did. That's why you guys keep me around. Let's see. Hey, Rob Faka. What would I recommend looking or listening for when purchasing a used deluxe reverb reissue on the used market? Um, well, ideally, you'd be able to take it out of the cabinet and open up the doghouse and make sure that the filter caps aren't leaking. But it almost doesn't matter if they are because they're so cheap to have changed out. Really are. Let's think about it this way. The things I would worry about if someone bought a deluxe reverb reissue, if there's a client brought in, I want to make sure that there weren't any burned areas on the main board. So I'd really want to see the inside, make sure the screen grid resistors didn't burn the board, or that the heater quick connects haven't burned the board, because that's very common. I want to make sure that the output transformer, power transformer, choke, and reverb transformer are either all original or Habor or Mercury, or if it's an older one, Classic Tone. I guess that's 4, not 5. I'd want to make sure that no mods have been done that are sloppy mods, and by that means including Bill M mods, because people do the Bill M mods and those things, and it just ruins the traces and pads because they're cramming. They have a board hole, a hole in the PCB that size, and they're trying to cram a lead of an orange drop through there, and they just push it through and make it fit. As far as, if the tubes are bad, you change out the tubes. If it's got a leaking filter cap, easy to change out. Just make sure it hasn't had fire. Make sure it hasn't had structural damage. Make sure no one's gone through and done something stupid. And if you see a whole lot of silicone goop everywhere, avoid. There's probably tons of stock ones that just need new tubes, and know that the ones with the early ones with the Eminence custom design for Fender generic speakers, those speakers suck, and the later ones with the Jensen C12Ks suck, and that amp will be an entirely different amp with a good speaker. All right, yeah, all right. I have worked on some 60s Supros, Dan. I'm not a big fan of any of the Valco and Airline amps. There's just the build quality is non-existent. The ground scheme is just any available bit of chassis, or even any available bit of metal, which is riveted, however loosely and unreliably, to a bit of aluminum chassis. I don't think Super amps and Airline amps and National amps and Silvertones were designed to be made to operate 60, 70 years later. They were designed for little Johnny who liked Beatles and Elvis to have something under the Christmas tree. And if they work for a while after that, bonus. And this whole got to keep those things going. They were pieces of crap in 1964. They're pieces of crap now. I know it's not a very popular thing to say, but there's a reason Fender amps are great. And, if Jimmy Page hadn't ever told people that he used the Supro for like 3 years, no one would care about Supros. Now, if you want a good one, go to my buddy who does the Sun Dragons. Mitch Colby builds the actual reproduction of what Jimmy Page actually used, and but he built it right. He built it out of an actual chassis with actual steel and aluminum and good materials. So it's the same circuit, but built by someone who's qualified to build an amplifier. So my disparaging of all Supros does not apply to that model. Anyway, it is time for our next intermission. So I'll see you guys in another 7 minutes. Let's get back into this thing a little bit early since I wasted so much time trying to play earlier. Let's see if I can click on this thing like I'm supposed to do every time. I only ever remember on this third hour. I've got them for all the others. I forget to pop them up and take them away. But nag. It does help, though. Let's see. Yeah, conductive adhesive. Thanks, Detroit Record. Yeah, really thinking about it as opposed to just reading, oh, this is what XYZ does. There's just so much stuff that we love, and including effects guys, Edge, David Gilmour, Lifeson, all these guys, all in front of the amp, or stuff that was added after, Van Halen for the good ones in front of the amp, and then stuff that was added to the, in the studio. They dry signal, put a mic on the cab, then you run it through a plate reverb in the studio or whatever. Thank you very much, though. Let's see. Thanks, Tom. Let's see. Michael Davis has got a Tweed super clone that buzzes when pushed on the bass strings, and the buzzing dissipates when I press on the cabinet. Oh, that's probably something vibrating in the cabinet. Number one thing on any of those Tweeds, the chassis can move around when you position it, and it's not always tight against the rear panel, and sometimes that makes that panel vibrate. So I always tighten the screws after I get the rear panel in place and make sure that cabinet is pushed up against the rear panel before I tighten the cabinet screws. Make sure the screw holding if it applies to your model, make sure that any hardware attaching the power transformer to the cabinet is very tight. And sometimes on Tweed style amps, I'll have to go get some very, very thin strips of very thin insulation sold for windows and put it on the back of the panel so that it dampens, so the panel is not flapping against the chassis. Pardon me. But I imagine it's probably mechanical, not an issue with the tubes or anything. But you could be loose hardware in the cabinet. Check all that stuff as well. Thank you very much. Is it Aptim? I assume is that Greek? Cyrillic? I'm sorry, I can't make it out. I hope I don't offend. I don't ever mean to. I want to learn more. I'm glad that you built a tube amp. I have experience with Trainwrecks, but there's a whole bunch of different Trainwrecks out there. Do you have a specific question? Trainwrecks built by Ken were one kettle of fish. Trainwrecks built by really good builders or another. Then there are a lot of really bad kit builds out there. There's a lot of gain and a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong in, say, a Trainwreck Express. So if you don't manage all your lead dress, and including vibration dampening just right, you can have nightmare results. But I'm glad that you had good results. Hey, Imak J, thank you. How do I ID the heater center tap on a 75 Fender Super Reverb? Got two grounded wires present, red and red-yellow. Red-yellow is typically going to be your HT center tap. Now, the question is, most Super Reverbs came from the factory without a physical center tap on the heater supply, and they just have two 100 ohm resistors to ground, usually from the pilot lamp. So if the pilot lamp assembly has two resistors on it, your amp does not have a heater center tap, and that red wire is probably a shield wire for the power transformer. Or some of the 75 stuff would have a bias done differently, where there's a bias tap and a bias negative, and that bias negative would be at ground. But if your Super Reverb has got two heater balance resistors, then it will not have a heater center tap. Let's see. Would I suggest doing a top boost add-on for AC30 from 1965 normal version? Julian, I would not, because it is a 1965, And the closer it is to original condition, the more valuable it is. And if you want to get a top boosted one to compare by another one, it doesn't have to be another JMI. I like the top boost circuit, but I like the normal version as well, the non-top boost. And or if you really want the top boost, and you've got a great example of an original condition 65 normal, see if you could trade it for someone who's got a 64 through 67 top boost, and maybe you'll both be happy. But I don't like to modify rare vintage amps. There's just too many alternatives to get the same sound without changing what made that one great and valuable to originally. Hey, Christopher Quine. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you're here, even if you are late. Let's see. Hey, Screaming Corpse Lord played with an artist, Tommy Wright the third, and he sang the praise of My City's Barbecue, well, rightly. My favorite spot from my hometown, if you want to visit. Well, the places that most tourists are going to go for barbecue are going to be Central Barbecue, which is absolutely crap, but there's a location downtown, and people think it's good, but it's dry and flavorless. Terrible sauces, and their slaw sucks. The most famous would be the Rendezvous, which is downtown right next to the Peabody. And their Rendezvous is unusual. Their ribs are unusual because it's a Greek seasoning. It's not like what you get anywhere else in Memphis. And they're quite good. They also have a mustardy slaw, which I like, but it's not what I want every time. The trouble with the Rendezvous is on a Friday or Saturday, or if there's a baseball game or a Grizzly game, it is crazy busy. All the tourists are there. All the people downtown are there. And any barbecue you get is probably been sitting under a heat lamp for 20 minutes. So I recommend the Rendezvous on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, unless there's a ball game. I don't take people there on Friday or Saturday. The best barbecue consistently in town, two places: the barbecue shop over on Madison and Cozy Corner on Jackson. Those are the best. Actually, it used to be called, not Jackson now. Sorry. Trying to remember what it's called now. Willis. It used to be called Auction because of the history of the city. Anyway, I can drive you there. North Parkway I guess I'll just say on North Parkway, right? I guess it turns into E. Willis before you get towards Mud Island. But Cozy Corner is my favorite. But they run out of ribs often by dinner time. So barbecue shop's a consistent one. Let's see. Sorry, I love talking about this stuff. Yeah, the Fralins in the casino are awesome. The Fralins and the P90s that come stock with the guitar were horrible, but the Fralins are beautiful. Any overheating on parts after build? Well, unless you have, if you're using carbon composite resistors, you can see bubbling coming out of them if they've gotten too hot, or burn marks. Odds are you won't see any issue after the fact. Sorry. Yeah, and people talk about the sidechain gating, cutting my voice out. I still got to remember that it's on, so I don't try to talk while I have the guitar and vice versa. It's just a difficult thing. Yeah, Don Thompson, see my earlier answer on Supros and how badly they're assembled and built. They're just not amps I particularly admire at all. Okay, yeah, Brad, you're correct. It is a press tie, but so it's not a carve, but it is arched. It's just not as strongly arched as the originals from my '63. But yeah, it is a press ply. Sorry. So is my 335. My 335 has more of a pressed arch than the Chinese Casino. But you're right, it's not a carve. Sorry, Mr. Brad. Emac J, do I sing? No, man, I don't squelch on nobody. I used to sing, but I tend not to do it on here for some reason. Hey, I'm glad you like the Headstrong Deluxe 5E3. I've not seen inside that, just the Princeton, and I'm not a fan of bus wires on pots because I'm a scientist, man. Suggestions on multi-can caps and where to purchase them. Well, Joe, if it's for a Marshall, get F&Ts. If it's for anything else, your only real options are Hayseed Hamfest and CE Distribution. In both cases, I say don't. See if you can replace with discrete radials or discrete axials, because all the other can caps suck, including Hayseed, including CE Distribution. Can I add depth and presence to a tube amp if it doesn't have one? Big Sill 48 asks. You can. It's just playing around with the negative feedback. If the amp has negative feedback, you can change it to have presence and depth / resonance. But sometimes amps don't sound right with that stuff added. But yeah, it's pretty easy to add that stuff. You just have to know what you're doing, and it's not a matter of, oh, I've got a super reverb, but I want it to sound like a Marshall, so I'll put it in the Marshall feedback circuit. It doesn't work like that. Let's see, people saying hey to each other. I think I'm at the first break. Or actually, well, I guess I'm talking. Let's see. All right. Trying to get to the next question. Hey, it's just Ryan. See, I told you I'd get to your question. Here we are. Hopefully you're still here. Just bought a Tone King Imperial Mark II, my first ever tube amp. Noticed a lot of hum, even with nothing plugged in. It gets louder with volume and alters with added bass. Is some noise expected? That amp should be pretty much dead silent, especially with the volume off. You could have an input jack which is loose. You could have an input jack which is not normally closed. You could have a bad tube. It is not normal to have hum with nothing plugged in. Hum can also be caused by a multitude of things. You could have hum because you have mismatched output tubes. You could have hum because the input jack isn't shunting to ground, a noisy tube, etc. I hope you bought it from a dealer. If not, contact Tone King and see if it's under warranty. They'll probably take care of you. Hey, Jeff McErlane, appreciate you joining us. The Tone King is a good amp. The Imperial is the one to get if you're going to get one of the Tone Kings. But while it should be quiet, I don't have enough information to troubleshoot specifically from here other than to give you things that are likely causes. And you can see 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had 2 twins on the channel. And the first video was inspecting 2 twins. I don't remember what the title is called, but it's in my Vintage Fenders playlist, and it's recent, the last 2 weeks. And on one of those twins, one of the input jacks had a bad solder joint, and there was hum. On other amps I've had on the channel, also found in that same playlist, though I don't know which video specifically, input jacks are supposed to have a tip and a sleeve. The sleeve is at ground. The tip is what sends the signal to the tube. That's what your guitar connects to. And there's another pin in there, which is called the normal. And it's supposed to, when nothing's plugged in, it's supposed to rest touching the tip, and it's supposed to be connected to ground. So when nothing's plugged in, it's supposed to ground out the input. And sometimes on jacks, that normal is not touching the input, so it doesn't get grounded out when nothing's plugged in. And that can inject a lot of noise into things. But you need to contact Tone King or your dealer and see what they can do for you. Those can be nasty. Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, Ashes Watches. On a Mojo Tone 5E3 amp kit, is it normal to have a fairly high noise floor? It should not have a high noise floor at all, but there are a lot of ways it will. Most kits are built badly. I think the kit instructions tell you to use a bus wire on the pots. That's a good way to get a high noise floor. I've got lots of actual 5E3 repairs on my channel from, I think the earliest I have is 54, and I've got through 59 or 60. And I show the insides of those. Look at the videos I have on the 50s 5E3 Deluxes on the channel. I've got very close shots showing everything. If yours doesn't look like that, find out where it's different and make it look like that. Not because I'm a genius, but I put it back to how Lupe wired them back in the days, and she did a great job. Thank you, Lupe. All right, now we're to the duck name nominations. Howard is no. Philip the Bird, that's a good one. Cluster duck. I'm glad to see no one's done Ducky McDuckface. Let's see. High watt amps. Thoughts? Yes, they're heavy. The good ones are rare. When they're working right, they sound fantastic. One of the problems, though, is a lot of stuff on the market now that even has the high watt logo on it is not a high watt design. There are a lot of bad amps with that badge. But if I'm talking specifically late 60s and 70s, Reeves era high watts are really nice things, but more than most people ever need for a gig these days. They're extremely loud, and they're finicky, and the jacks are unreliable. Modern high watts, so far, they're not good, but I've not tried all modern high watts. But a lot of the stuff they're putting out below $1,500, especially the smaller models, are kind of junky. Hey, Darth Maximus, I don't have an estimate for you right now. I've got about 10 amps I've got to make more progress on. I've got a 75 Marshall over there I've got to finish up this week, and I just got a bunch of stuff out the past couple days and some more to do Monday. Keep knocking on my door. It's not from disinterest or rudeness, but I just can't take any amps in until I know that I'm going to be able to get to them relatively quickly. Otherwise, everyone loses. Hey, Hacks owner, you built an amp? Okay. Sounds pretty good, but not great. A little fizzy and brittle. Thoughts? I don't have any thoughts on an amp that you built out of an organ chassis. I'm sorry. I'd say that the Hammond chassis is a much better place to build an amp than that Filmo sound thing that people do. But I can't tell you what to make different based on what you have. If I don't see what you have and what I don't have a crystal ball. I'm sorry. I'd love to give you feedback, but that's too vague. Hey, Mark Valenti built a Prince Reverb, changed the Reverb B+ node to then use node with a 10K drop resistors. I've shown my channel. The Reverb driver is 340 volts on the plate. Any issues? No. That's going to be a little bit less than it did in stock form before you move the node, so it'd be fine. More importantly, it should not have that hum that most Princetons have on the reverb return. Thanks, Tuick. Appreciate that. Let's see. Hey, Joe. He's got an Vox AC30 hand-wired, 60th anniversary. They won't turn on. No power light. Tried changing a fuse, but that didn't do it. What might my next step be? Well, there's more than one fuse in that amp. There's the mains fuse, and there's probably a HT fuse, and there may be a heater fuse, and there may be a rectifier fuse. I don't know. So what can happen is that you can have a mains fuse that's fine, but you've blown some other fuse and your pilot light bulb is dead. So you flip the main switch and the bulb doesn't come on. So you don't know if there actually is power in there, but it's not getting to one of the secondaries. You really need to open it up, see how many fuses there are in the amp. Some of them are, I'm trying to remember that model, whether they're on the bottom of the chassis or whether they're on the board. Make sure all the fuses are good, because you could have one blown fuse in the heater supply, and that would also probably take out the lamp. You change out that fuse, your amp comes back to life, but changing out the mains fuse won't do that. So you need to open it up and document how many fuses are in there. And I've had that model, but it's been a long time. I don't remember how many fuses are in there. So, and just make sure that if it calls for fast blow, you put in a fast blow fuse. If it calls for slow blow, you put in a slow blow fuse. You don't put in a 4 amp fuse where it says 2 amp. You put in the same rating. And if you need to order fuses, Tube Depot is a good source for most people to get the fuses, at least in the United States and Canada. If you're in Europe, find someone else to get fuses from. Maybe Tube Amp Doctor would be a good source. But most of the fuses that we use in amplifiers are not available at most hardware stores these days. And while Mauser and DigiKey have them, they're hard to order for most individuals, whereas Tube Depot and other guitar-centric sites make it easy. I hope it's just a fuse. Hey, Chris, the brand of modern tubes I like depends on the tube type. 6V6 right now, I like the Electro Harmonix. 6L6, I like the Tungsol STR. Preamp tubes for ATs and AUs, I've been getting Joint Army Navy New Old Stock 70s stuff, typically Philips. So it's not current production, but they're quite good. But the Tube Amp Doctor ATs are quite good, as are the JJ ECC 81s and 82s. For preamp tubes, I really like the Electro Harmonix 7025s, but I hate the Electro Harmonix 12AX7. And I used to really like the Tungsol 12AX7s. I hope they get good again. And I still, now that the glass issues seem to be in the rearview mirror, I still quite like the JJs. I think the JJs are a good brand. For EL34s, I think JJ and Electro Harmonix and Tungsol and the Mullard reissues are all pretty much equivalent. I used to really like the Tube Store Preferred series, but those things went really weird during COVID. I don't know if it's just that they ran out of the good ones, and I haven't tried that supply again. They may be back on top. I don't know. Thanks, Tionley. I don't have a favorite Fender amp, but Vibrolux Deluxe, Tweed Deluxe, and Super Reverb are probably the 4 top contenders. That doesn't mean I don't like a Twin. It doesn't mean I don't like a Pro. It doesn't mean I don't like a Vibroverb. But Twins can be a bit much. Sent to me, asked, why does my Deluxe Reverb amp produce a loud snap when I want to shut down after playing? It could be a lot of things. It could be a faulty switch, could be a bad solder joint, could be a cap that's drawing too much current. I'd have to look at it. And thank you very much. I'm not the greatest amp tech out there. I'm a very good amp tech. I try very hard to be. It's a promise I made to myself. It's one of the reasons I put my stuff out there so you guys can call me if you see me do anything bad. But I'm sure there are better amp techs than me. They just don't have time to mess around with this newfangled YouTube thing or know or care how to work a camera. In all modesty, I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm about as good a general purpose tech as you're likely to find. There are guys who are going to specialize in like radio receivers who are better than I am and know more about that kind of stuff. And there are guys who are more specialized in the solid state stuff that I don't want to deal with a whole bunch of Crown macro techs. That's their everyday bread and butter. They were born and bred in that briar patch. But and there are guys who are more specialist in certain styles of stuff. But for a GP, I think I'm doing all right. But thank you very much. But I'm not the greatest. Ali was the greatest. What buffer tuner do I recommend? Well, Richard asked. Oh, I really like this little TC Polytune, the new one with the buffer in it. It sounds really good, and by sound, I mean it doesn't sound. It's very, very good, and I have designed and built buffers, and I know what it takes, and they got it right. Hey, Greg Drona. I'm going to try that again politely. Hey, Greg Drona. Rebuild water damaged Fender AC568 works perfectly, but still has more hiss than my 5F2A. You don't intend to change it. Just get the yuck out and a new wire. Got a new top coat, an SPG80L. Any other advice? Alcohol is the solution, and in this case, it's probably the solution. See my videos on getting DC out of Fender fiberboards with isopropyl alcohol. And I show that again and again. And what I don't show in every video is after I've powered off the amp and gotten all the voltage out of the amp, in your case, I would then remove the 3 screws and very carefully slide the bottom board out from the amp, out of the chassis. You might have to disconnect a ground wire from the reservoir cap that might be in the way, but you can usually fish the bottom insulator board out, clean that separately, and practically just soak it in isopropyl alcohol, and then really dry it all out, and then do the top board. And because you've removed the bottom board, there's not 2 pieces of paper to hold the alcohol in the middle. It'll be the board and steel beneath it with an air gap, and you can use a heat gun, it'll evaporate out. But alcohol soaks into the paper, and any water that was in that paper gets driven out of the paper by the alcohol, because alcohol displaces the water, and the alcohol can be driven out. It'll evaporate by itself, but you use a heat gun or you heat up the eyelets with the iron, it drives it out really fast and pushes all the water out ahead of it. And usually that will take care of problems like that and get all the water out and all the stray voltage, which results in hiss and buzz. Thanks, Philip Madrigal. Hey, Darth Maximus, I will watch emails and the floodgates will eventually open, but it's also pre-existing clients get first dibs. Jay Singleton says, should I use a standby switch in the 6568 Deluxe Reverb reissues? It won't hurt, but you don't need to. It's got a tube rectifier. The standby switch is purely cosmetic. You don't need to use it at all when powering off. I never use a standby switch on a tube rectified amp like that. That Super Reverb, very valuable, 1965. That standby switch has been in play the entire time that I've had that amp, and I just use the power switch. It works just fine. Hey, BC Electronics, 76 Vibrolux. He's working on his 330K, 750R, and 330K long tail pair of resistors, 2K cathode. Yeah, the 330K are the common values of grid leaks in that era for the AT7. They went from 1 meg to 330K. 650R is usually 470R. It doesn't really matter. You can use 470, you can use 650, keep the 22K. The thing you need to remember is that when they decreased the grid leaks on that phase inverter by a factor of 3, so they went from 1 meg to 330K, they increased the input cap by a factor of 10. They went from 1 nanofarad to 10 nanofarad, and that circuit has too much low end compared to a 60s example. So if you take out that factor of 10 input cap and put in a factor of 3 input cap, which matches the factor of 3 grid leak change, by putting in a 3.3 nanofarad input cap, then the circuit you have will sound like a 60s Vibrolux. It's much better. Much, much better. One simple change. CBS made a mistake. Is the JC77 worth repairing? Very rarely. It's a 77-watt version of the JC120. Those are noisy amps with no headroom. Deadeye Cold Cut says, I have a local builder who makes a Fender 6G61 Vibroverb. What is my take on those amps? Well, my take on a 61 Vibroverb is that it is a transitional model and it got a lot better in 63. My take on your local builder's builds, I don't have a take because I don't know if he does a good job. But if I wanted a Vibroverb, I'd want a 63, 64 example, not a 61. The 61 hasn't gotten into the magic yet. Did they even have a Vibroverb in 61? That can't be right. I don't think they had a Vibroverb in 60. I think Vibroverb came out in 63. I could be wrong. The fish, I tend to avoid the Pro Tube series as much as possible. I'm not a big fan of it. Hey, BC, look up 6G16 brown panel vibroverb. All right, yeah, 63 is what I'm thinking. Yeah. Maybe he got thrown off by the 61. Sorry, I'm trying to think what I was going to say. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Pro Tube. I think Fender was trying to throw in a lot of stuff at the fridge to see what would stick at that time. A lot of stuff at the wall to see what would stick. Pretty much from 81 through 95-ish when they came out with the 65 reissue series, I don't like those Fenders in the middle. Sorry. Some of them are okay, but hey, it's just right. It's cool. I'm glad you're here. It's not no one's criticizing you for putting the question up more than once. But I do try to answer every question in order. If I see the same question twice, I worry that I hit the wrong button and I scroll back up and then I'm like, where am I in the chat? Because I'm a one-man show doing this stuff. I just don't understand the why people like the JC120, JC77 these days. You just get the same sound out of a Boss Katana for less money, and then you get like 99 other sounds for free when you buy the Katana version of the Jazz Chorus. Yeah. Well, Chris Reed, the question marks aren't necessary. I already answered the questions on Hiwatts and modern tubes, but they do help the questions stand out from the chat. I try to catch them all, but sometimes I miss them, and the question marks just make them pop from the chat a little bit, especially here in this third hour when you guys are talking to each other as much as we're talking to you and I are discussing things. Let's see. Is it possible to predict the effects of cathode bias resistors ahead of time since the plate volts? In terms of calculating what resistor to get X result? Yeah, I'll tell you, it is possible to do it with math, but it's faster. Honestly, I never do the math. I know that, okay, most circuits using 26L6s will use like a 220 ohm resistor. So I'll put in a 250 ohm resistor and measure what it is. Hey, I'd like that a little warmer. Okay, I'll try 180. That's too warm. We'll go to a 200. Because I can just tack solder them. I can give you alligator clips. It's faster for me to roll through some 75-cent white ceramic block Zycon 10 watters or 5 watters than to do the math. Because the math, you're always chasing a shifting target. And the math may say, oh, I need an exactly 83.78 ohm resistor. Well, that doesn't exist. So you got to say, well, let me try the 72, let me try the 80 to what 76 or 82. Which one's closer to what I want? Or was my math even right? Because the math will tell you what is, again, like at the beginning of the chat, the math tells you a safe range. Anywhere in this range is safe. It doesn't tell you if this sounds good, or this sounds good, or if this is where you want to be, or this is where you want to be, this is really. Just this is as high as you can go safely, this is as low as you can go safely. Anywhere in between there, the electrons are not going to do any damage to anything else. And that's where you have to have ears and playing experience. Well, the thing about Bottom Kitchen, yeah, you got to use. I make fun of John Cordy for this. He's got that's not a knife. That's the worst Australian ever. That's not a knife thing. He just uses a big Bazooka Joe kind of thing. Is just ridiculous. Oh, that's all you need. And notice that I have it set to the lowest setting, so I'm not going to cut through anything that I don't want. I don't need to use a machete. I just need to cut through the tape. So I don't want to cut the cardboard. I don't want to cut what's underneath there. Brand new utility knife blade. Yeah, I know I did the wrong accent. Hey, man, I couldn't even do my own accent at the start of this fucking chat, Brad. So, that's not a nice. But I tried to find my Australian, which is all back of the nasal cavities, and I don't have any nasal cavities right now. That hurt. Anyway, any comments on Harvard versus Brown Princeton? Yeah, the Harvard sounds better. The Tweed era stuff sounds better than the Brown era. I like the Brown era, but the Tweed stuff's got... The Brown era is, aside from the stuff with the harmonic trim was trying to get clean headroom. And they got that perfect with AB 763 and the 64 Princeton and all that. The Tweed stuff is his own thing, and I love the Harvard. It's a single channel, lower wattage 583 Deluxe. I think the Deluxe is the better app. But the Harvard tracks really well. If you ask, guys like Steve Cropper, what does he know about recording guitar? The Brown Princeton's cool, but it's not either of the things. Hey, Dale Boyle Music. On the other flip side of that, the Sur Ombre is a great version of the 62 Brown Deluxe. And I think the Deluxe is one of the better sounding Brown amps, especially if you like sound of early ZZ Top. I was really surprised that the speaker was quite good. I was not expecting to like that V-type, but I thought it was quite nice. But I would still want to play around with some others. But I suggest sticking with it until you really know the amp well. If the amp doesn't work for you, before you sell it, try a few other speakers in other cabs. But if you love the amp and you want to try different speakers, that's great. But if the amp just doesn't do everything you need it to do, don't modify it unless you're sure you want to keep it. Oh, Brad, here's the thing. I've never really understood the high-end, expensive Strat Tele thing, but then again, I just get a shit one and do all the upgrades myself. Well, first of all, you and I can make any amp sound good, and you can make any guitar better. This is not expensive when you look at inflation over the time. In 1989, for $1,200, I bought a Fender American Vintage Reissue Strat. And it was not as good as this. If you adjust for inflation, that American Vintage Reissue Strat costs more than this K-Line does today. And if you look at what the custom shop charges, they're almost up to twice as much as what this K-Line costs. And if I look at what the American Vintage Reissue Strats, the American Vintage 2s are, they're like $2,600. So coming up on what this costs, and this is a much better guitar than what Fender's putting out these days. So I don't think this is an expensive guitar. I think it's just that the market has gotten used to very, very inexpensive Indonesian guitars. But for two guys working out of a shop in St. Louis, Missouri, where they've got to have health care, they've got to have food, they've got to have lights, they've got to have utilities, they've got to have marketing, they've got to be able to ship these things out across the world, I think these things are really well priced. And if they sold more of them, the price could come down. So I don't think this is a high-end expensive. I think this is working man's attainable. It's like in watches. A Rolex is a high-end, it's not the highest end. People don't even know that there's another tier of stuff that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's crazy shit. But for like Sultans and crap. But, a Rolex is a $12,000 watch if you can get one. 30, 40 years ago, it was a working man's attainable watch. It was a gold watch, but, the average person could get one. It's not that anymore. I've got a Seiko on. This is what Rolex used to be, And this is a jeans and a T-shirt guitar. It's an everyday thing. It's not cheap. But if you love guitar and you love Strats and you don't mind the headstock and you play one of these things, it may follow you home, and you could certainly justify it. 6 to 8K for a Strat, yeah, it's crazy, especially since the custom shop barely even makes sure that the wood stock is dry before they build a guitar out of it. Let's see. I'll try to speed through and get caught up so I don't miss any questions if I can. let's see. It's hard. Like, here's another one. I really need to put a thing up that's permanently up there. Put question marks before questions. Piotr says, my amp DSL-20C is a little too loud for my bedroom. What is a better solution, attenuator or JHS? Black box amp and effects loop. I play clean and crunch, don't play metal. Really? I mean, if that 20-watt thing with the master volume is too loud for your bedroom, you don't need an amp in your bedroom. Just for practice at home. This could also be the Neural DSP thing. This could be the HX Stomp thing. This could be the software version of this loaded onto your laptop. This could be a little FM9 from Fractal. There's so many things on the market today that will do the job at home. Let an amplifier amplify. Let a signal modifier that makes the sound coming out of your speaker, out of your pickup, sound like what you want it to sound like for practice. Do that. They're separate roles at this point. If a 20-watt amp with a master volume is too loud for your bedroom, don't bring this down to here. Find something that already thrives here. Does that make sense? And it's probably, you could probably pick up a used Pod XT Pro for less the price of either of those attenuators and get better results. Is the Marshall JTM Studio any good? Sorry, Frank. No, it's not. Seth B got his tube tester working. Great. Red plates them all. Brand is important on pots, Spartan, but the size, format, and all that of the pots is more important. Man, I'll tell you what, the Roland is, I don't think is where to learn. Well, on the one hand, it's easy because it's built like a pedal, but let's see. Bottom Kitchen, I don't have any great insight into the Dumble thing, preserving legacy. I think it's a cash grab. Maybe they'll offer a real good product for the money, but they're in it for the money. And I mean, for all those other altruistic businesses that are doing it because they just like to do things, almost all businesses are there to make money. Apparently not mine, but business. But I think the whole Dumble thing is just crazy. Let's see. What do I think of Music Man apps? Bill, I answer that question in just about every chat. They're good. They're heavy. They're outdated. They're expensive to repair. They were a cool thing. But unless you're just a Jerry Garcia nut, there are better apps these days. Japanese guitars are crazy expensive. A friend of mine was looking at getting a made in Japan late 80s telly. I'm like, they're wanting $2,800 for that? That's a $300 guitar. It's a $300 made in Japan telly. For $2,800, you can get a brand new American Vintage 2, or you could start to get into a K-line, or it doesn't have to be a K-line. You can get a Nash, you can get a used exotic. There's so many good guitars out there. Or, that Eric Johnson Strat, my Sunburst, that's 19 years old now. My God. But, the Eric Johnson is still the best production Strat they've made in 20 years. Consistently. What is my recommendation for the best 2-channel 1x12 amp for small gigs and home? I would not say that my recommendation would be for the best 2-channel. My recommendation would be for the best 1-channel amp and then a pedal that lets you get the other thing. But if you force me to answer on the market today, either the Pete Thorne 15 or the Runt 50 by Friedman. So the Sir PT 15 or Bella. I think Bella's only clean. So the PT 15 by Sir or the Runt 50 by Friedman will do pretty much what you're looking for. Really well. But, I'm also a big fan of just getting a deluxe reverb or Sir Bella and sticking a bunch of overdrive pedals in front of it. The audience won't know the difference, and you'll get a fantastic result, unless you're doing metal. I need to get Mitch on the channel. I was going to get him on the channel last January, and I got the flu or something, and I forgot to get him on. He's such a nice guy. Mitch Colby. Working Player 53, I understand what you're saying, and this is not oh, you poor people. And, you know, I got really lucky with that Made in China casino, but this is not something you're going to get from any Indonesian guitar unless you just win the freaking lottery. It's just really, this really is a step well above and beyond. If Brad were here and he played it, he'd be like, okay, you're right, fucker. That doesn't mean that an Indonesian guitar can't be made to play really good and sound really good, but there is a level that they are rarely, if ever, going to get to. For most people, some guys are deaf. I'm not saying that you're one of them. You know, that said, those PRS DGT-SEs are really good guitars. Hey, Mark, do I have a favorite guitar solo? I've got several. Limelight, something, Kid Charlemagne. Those come to mind immediately. If you want to listen to The Messiah Will Come Again, Gary Moore's all right, but man, you need to listen to Danny Gatton. Not Danny Gatton, fuck. Roy Buchanan. Sorry. Roy would understand that mistake. Let's see, trying to get to any questions. I have not had a Garnet amp in, Dawson, but every live stream people ask me about Garnet amps. It's just that Canada and Memphis are very far apart. Let's see. I know it's dead time when I'm sitting here reading, but I'm trying to find any questions before we wrap things up in the next 5 minutes. How are blackface bandmasters or silverface dual showman heads? They're fantastic. They just don't have reverb, but there's lots of reverb available in studio stuff these days. Producer Man as well, you should know with that title. Yeah, the small amps are very much in vogue right now, so the prices are up, and the supers and stuff have gone way low in value. Blackface bandmasters can be absolute steals. I've seen them. When I was last preparing to do amps under $2,000 video, I found a real good condition looking one for like $1,300 on Reverb. Dual Showmans are pretty much the same amp, just with more tubes, just, you know, twins without reverb. Also great amps. And you can find supers and twins in that same price range occasionally from the 70s. But it's tricky. At a certain price, you know, I think you'd be fine with any of those. Once you get a load box on, it doesn't matter if it was 45 watts or 20 watts. Hey, Drew Snedden, I've got some videos up showing different speakers with Voxes, but the AC15C1 sounds pretty good with that greenback, and I'm not usually a fan of greenback and open back, but it works well with the AC15C1. But the blue is the traditional sound, and it's really nice with the ET65 as well as the Creamback 65. Working Play 53. Well, because the Vox traditionally didn't use the greenback, and it's a different sound. It's not a bad sound, but it is different than what Vox ever did back in the day. Albert says, I got a 64 hand-wired deluxe reverb. Sounds pretty good. Use it mainly for the bright channel. No noise. Rarely play it. Should I keep it and have it modded or just sell it towards Germino? Well, if you like it, the sound, it doesn't have any noise, you can play it all you want. You don't have to mod it. But, odds are it's a ticking time bomb. And I got a video come out tomorrow morning. Watch that video. Make a more informed decision on whether you have warm feelings towards your amp after that. But yeah, Metro and Germino, among others, are infinitely better brands. Let's see. I'm so glad I don't have to mow the lawn right now. That plus it's raining. Let's see. Strings and Things went away, and Bill Avanda. Blue City Cafe, I've been to once in the last 10 years, I think. But Memphians rarely go to Beale Street unless that's where their job is. Or Beale Street is just it's like a boring version of Bourbon Street, all brought to you by Bud Light. I just never go. The food was good back in the day, but I've not been in forever. Thanks, Frank Pizza. Bo, I don't know if you can right now. I'm so backed up, and I don't want to piss people off by saying, bring it in, and then it's 6 weeks before I get to it. I try to do them in chunks where I know that I'll get to it within a month at least. Hey, Ray Krakowski, thank you very much. Well, typically you're going to have hum, or you're going to have really weird artifacts, especially if you're playing with any overdrive. Or you might have blocking distortion. You can also look and visibly see if there's any physical smudge coming out, or Brad calls it shmoo, coming out of the positive ends where the leads come out of the cat body if you have visible access. Sent to me, why does my Blues Junior crackle or pop when turning on? It could be a lot of things, but those things are really prone to breaking the solder joints on their filter caps, which like to arc, and they like to have other connections on the output tubes, which break and arc. So basically it means that it's a Blues Junior that's being turned on. Philip Madrigal, I answered some questions about two brands I recommend earlier in the chat. I'm trying to wrap up, so see that earlier. Sorry. How do I feel about conversions? I was telling someone today, if you want to build a 5F6A Bassman, buy a chassis and to make a 5F6A Bassman. Don't try to turn a Blues DeVille into it. The Blues DeVille does not have the right size openings for things, and it doesn't matter if someone can do it. It's a lot more work. It's a lot of unnecessary work. You can get so many 5F6A Bassman chassis out there and just build it right and make it easier. Why don't we see tweed amps on the bench much, if at all? Well, you see pretty high percentage of tweed amps on my bench in my videos, but it's a high percentage of a low percentage of amps out there. There aren't as many 50s tweed amps in the world as there are the black panel stuff, both in terms of the rise of pop music and country music, and the rise of amplification in music, and the rise of electric guitar. And then CBS bought Fender in '65, and so all of a sudden they had world distribution. So there are a lot more 64 through 69 Fenders in the world than there were 49 through 63. Thank you very much, sent to me. Appreciate that. Favorite double P90s guitar? This, for me, Collings is a nice one too. if you want to get fancy about it, let's all get fancy. You know, or various special Gibson specials. But you got LP special, fine. LP Junior special, fine. But avoid the SG special because it doesn't have any wood for the neck there. It can sound great, but the entire thing becomes a vibrato. Let's see. All right, I'm trying to get to the end here. P.S. Neely, you could have a dirty tube socket, you could have a bad solder joint, all kinds of stuff. Get in there with a chopstick if you feel brave and just push on every wire and every connection and see if you can replicate the pop. Or see if you can isolate to which channels it is. Well, that gets into the distribution. The Marshalls that are 800 euros there are $2,000 here. So that's why we say get the Friedman. They're cheaper. There's got to be, I would say, in knowing what I know of the European market, I'd suggest and would urge people to check out a what's the brand? The Duchess 40, you know, all the lunchbox style heads that who makes those things? It's Anderton's Music is apparently the money behind them. Victory amps. I'll take a Victory over a Marshall any day these days. So if the Victory is a better price in Europe, go for the Victory over the Marshall in Europe. Here in America, the Friedman's comparably priced or a better price than the Victory, and certainly a better price, quality ratio, and everything ratio than what Marshall's making these days. Let's see. And I'm not even a huge fan of Victory, just compared to what Marshall's making. Victory is awesome. All right, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get through everything tonight. Don't pick up a Mesa Boogie Strategy 400 stereo amp for 100 pounds, especially with the blonde power transformer. It's not work. Even if it's working perfectly for 100 pounds, odds are you're going to be wasting 100 pounds. Take yourself to dinner. That's a shit. If I go have 50 to 70 meals at Greg's and enjoy life, and not have a Mesa in your life. Man, I miss Greg's. I don't miss Mesa Strategies. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to get to the end of the chats ever. Raphael, I have to wrap up with Raphael's question today because we're already 5 over. Thank you very much, Raphael. Early Sunday morning here in Australia. Wow. Yeah, that's how it works. What is my opinion on AC50s, and is there a particular production era that I should be looking for? Well, AC50s were briefly made. There are two versions. They're cathode biased differently. And then they kind of quickly went to the AC100. And I've had AC100s. I've not actually had an AC50, so I would have to go look at my big JMI book to remember what the difference is. But there's a difference in how the bias was done on the first ones versus the second ones. Any of them that are in good condition can be made to be great. And if you're in Australia right now, Brad would be a great person to take care of an AC50 for you if you're around Sydney. And up in Melbourne, we've got Jason head first. And I think Chris is out in Perth. Is that right? So if you have an AC50 in Australia, someone near you will be able to fix that for you. But I've not had one of the AC50s in. They're cool things, though. Basically, it's just the AC30 top boost circuit done into a giant output section with 6L6s or EL34s. It's 34s. And they run real hot and they're real heavy. But they have the sound if you are so inclined. The trouble is the AC50s also, I know I keep rambling, AC50s also correlate to the time when Vox was using horns, not just speakers, but horns as well. And that is an unpleasant sound to get the horn. But you can usually turn those off and just have the speaker itself. So we're going to sign off, and I'm sorry for any questions I did not get to. There's so many questions today. I'm very glad to see everyone here, and to have to do this again sometime. Bye, everyone.